Good afternoon, everyone. It's time for yet another solo leveling light novel reading. So, as many of you may already know, the way I have it set up is that this is just essentially going to be done in an audiobook type style, where you guys just hear my dulcet tones as I read the solo leveling story from beginning to end, like this. So that way, chat can be seen off to the side, and you guys can enjoy your time here. Today, we are going to be going through chapters. Sorry, I had to adjust my mic there. Today, we are going to be going through chapters 11 through 20. Now, once we reach chapter 15, I'm going to take a short break, recuperate, regain some energy, so that way we can read the final extra chapters for today. Let's get started. Chapter 11. As soon as he muttered that out, a gentle blue aura enveloped him. Isn't this sensation that? Right away, he recalled Jui's face. When he was getting healed by her, he felt the sensation similar to what he was feeling right now. If he were to put this feeling into words, then it'd be like a refreshing blast of air entering his lungs before leaving again. Something like that? Phew. He felt the blue aura slowly dissipating. For some reason, he kind of felt a bit rueful. Jin got up from the floor and lightly jumped up and down on the spot and stretched his body this way and that. How can this be? His heart that felt like it might explode was beating calmly now, and his rough breathing had stabilized as well. He didn't even feel a speck of fatigue. His body that was on the brink of collapsing felt refreshed as if he just got up from a night of good rest. The effect, in other words, was top-notch. Isn't this really amazing? Jin's eyes now resembled circles. He wasn't sure whether this was some kind of magic or not, but this phenomenon could change him in the most astonishing way without a doubt. In that case, would those stat points be the same? When Jin shifted his gaze around, he spotted a small box resting on top of the bed as well as his own stat window floating in the air. I guess that thing over there is the random box. The important thing was his stat window, though. This window displayed simple information about himself. Name, Sung Jinu. Level, 1. Class, none. Title, none. HP, 100. MP, 10. Tiredness, 0. Stats, Strength, 10. Stamina, 10. Agility, 10. Intelligence, Intelligence, 10. Perception, 10. Oh, Mihai. Good to see you. And Don T as well. I got you guys off to the side on chat so I can see everyone talking. Intelligence, 10. Perception, 10. Available points to distribute, 3. Skills, passive skills, unknown, level max. Tenacity, level 1. Active skills, dash, level 1. The stat he saw was quite similar to a starting character from an online game he used to play many moons ago. Is this my current stat value? His current level was 1. All of his stats were also at the bottom of the heap, too. If he thought about the current reality of what he was like, the one where he was ranked as the weakest even among the ranky hunters, then there was nothing to be surprised about here. Good to see you, Ramil. What he paid attention to was the skills column. A passive skill called Tenacity and an active one called Dash. For some reason, he felt rather familiar with them. I remember now. Yesterday, or to be more precise, back in the early dawn of this morning, he remembered hearing those words while being chased around by the centipedes in the penalty zone. It happened probably after 3 hours of him constantly running for his dear life. He was suddenly greeted by a couple of new messages. Skill, Dash level 1 has been learned. Skill, Tenacity level 1 has been learned. Back then, he was far too busy running to think about what they could mean. But it was a different story now. Jinwoo confirmed the explanations available for the skills. Skill Dash level 1.
Active skill. Mana required to activate 5.
The constant running fortified
your legs. When this skill is activated, your movement speed will increase by 30%. During this activation, 1 mana will be spent every minute. Skill, Tenacity level 1. Passive skill. Mana required to activate. None. You possess untiring tenacity. When your stamina drops below 30%, this skill will automatically activate and reduce all damage received by 50.
Did I learn Dash and Tenacity because I stubbornly ran around like there's no tomorrow? Reduce all damage received by 50%. I'd said reduce by 50, but it's
reduce all damage received by 50%.
Did I learn Dash and Tenacity because I stubbornly ran around like there's no tomorrow? That seemed to be about right. In other words, if he kept on repeating a certain action over and over again, and happened to meet the requirement conditions, he would be able to learn new skills. Holy cow! Was this an incredible advantage? The thing was, the skills individual hunters use were acquired when they went through the awakening process, or learned through the items called rune stones that dropped very rarely from monsters ranked A and above. Understandably, the prices of these rune stones would start from the lowest of several 100,000 won to dozens of billion wons at the top end. At the last auction, the most expensive runestone was sold for around 70 billion won, over 62 million US dollars. Apparently, this runestone contained a skill that could revert many injured people back to their original conditions in one go, and it was snapped up by an anonymous overseas rank S healer who had reputedly emptied out his entire life savings. Jinwoo's heart began beating faster. A skill that increased his movement speed, as well as another that decreased the amount of damage received. Sure, they weren't as good as those skills that sold for billions of won, but they were still amazing to him regardless. What's going on, Uthmoney? No way you're reading the solo leveling light novel, but you haven't read Shadow Slave or LOTM? Don't know what either one of those are, so apparently not. A skill that increased his movement speed, as well as another that decreased the amount of damage received. Sure, they weren't as good as those skills that sold for billions of won, but they were still amazing to him regardless. And he got to learn those for free, too. His overall magic energy value was too low, so it'd be hard to use them properly. But still, it was better than not knowing them, wasn't it? Besides, the tenacity skill doesn't even need mana to activate too. It seemed that this mana thing was his magical energy. If that was the case, then even though he didn't have a lot of magic energy, he'd be able to freely use the tenacity skill. That alone was a huge gain. By the way, what could this unknown thing be?
Skills. Passive skills. Unknown level max.
The unknown that occupied one whole slot of the passive skills column. Since it was located in the passive column, it meant it activated automatically, but there was not one explanation or any information on it. Not even a clue, huh? The amount of information he could learn was just too limited. Even if he burst his brain trying to figure it out, he knew there wouldn't be any answers. So Jinwoo shifted his gaze to elsewhere. Stat points, is it? 3 additional stat points he got as a reward remained there, still to be distributed.
Stat. Strength 10. Stamina 10. Agility 10. Intelligence 10. Perception 10. Available points to distribute 3.
I'm sure this means I can increase any one of my stats by 3 points, right? There were 5 categories in the list of stats. Maybe because he was a mere level 1, the values of each stat were simple, to say the least. However, if he considered how reality operated, he couldn't take these stats lightly at all. If his abilities changed for real with a moment's decision, then who in this world would be able to casually make such choices? Jinu's expression became serious. Strength is no doubt talking about my physical power. He could more or less figure out what strength, stamina, and agility could mean. After all, those were the kind of stats one would often encounter in video games. Y'all having such a jolly conversation in chat. It's good to see all of you, including you, Ravi. It's good to see you. No way, bro, you don't know about Shadow Slave or Lord of the Mysteries? I have no idea. I have no idea about either one of these. But now that I do, they'll be added to a list for me to check out later. He could more or less figure out what strength, stamina, and agility could mean. After all, those were the kind of stats one would often encounter in video games. The question was, with the last two stats, intelligence and perception. Intelligence and perception, then. And just like before, the unfriendly system didn't provide any answers whatsoever. If he increased intelligence, would he actually get smarter, for instance? And if he increased perception, then would he become more sensitive? Whatever the case may have been, he felt that those two stats didn't really seem all that useful to him right now. He was a melee-type hunter to begin with. What he needed was power, speed, or even stamina. If you were to ask me to choose between the three, I'd inevitably go with strength. If he got physically stronger, many things would become that much easier for him. Also, he wanted to find out what kind of change would take place with his body once the stat values had been increased. Since he thought that this change would be much more prominent with the increase in the strength stat, he ended up investing all 3 points on it. I was about to say onto it, but it's on it. All 3 points to the strength stat.
Cling! Stats: Strength 13, Stamina 10, Agility 10, Intelligence 10, Perception 10. Available.
Look at me fumbling over my words.
Available points to distribute 0.
Is that all? Indeed, it looked like it. The only change he could tell was the strength stat value floating in front of his eyes like hologram projections, changing from 10 to 13. Unlike how it was in cartoons or movies, his body didn't feel like it was overflowing with uncontrollable power or anything like that. Did anything actually change or not? He decided to use his muscles to find out. Jinu stood next to the bed and lifted it. He felt a bit of weight, but he was able to pick it up easier than he thought. However, he found it impossible to tell whether this was because of the bed being light or his strength having been improved. I should have lifted the bed first before spending the darn points. Since he had already spent all the points before confirming, it was hard to tell the difference between before and after. Only if I had some more points to spend. Jinu licked his lips in regret only for a certain memory to jump out at him. The rewards from the penalty quest! Today wasn't the only time he got to complete the daily quests. He might have nearly died, but he sure as heck did complete the penalty quest, and he remembered seeing the message about the rewards being available as well. Jinu hurriedly opened the mailbox.
Rewards for completing the penalty quest is now available. Would you like to confirm the rewards? Yes or no?
I knew it! Jinu clenched his fists tightly. Of course, it's a resounding yes! The following
rewards are available. Reward 1, 3 additional stat points. Reward 2, 1 random box. Would you like to collect them all?
Gotta catch 'em all, Sung Jinu. Sorry. Unlike the daily quest rewards, the option of the full status recovery was absent. But, well, what he needed right now was the additional stat points anyway. He was momentarily worried about there being a huge difference in rewards since they were from a penalty quest and all, but he was relieved to find 3 points waiting for him. Jinu hummed joyously to himself. Add all 3 points to this strength stat.
Kring! Stats. Strength, 16. Stamina, 10. Agility, 10. Intelligence, 10. Perception, 10. Available points to distribute, 0.
His strength jumped from 13 to 16. Jinu stood next to the bed again and put some strength in his muscles, and he was able to lift up the bed a lot easier than before. He could definitely tell the difference now. It's for real! His physical strength had really improved. If he were to consider the change purely through the stats alone, then the starting value of 10 had increased by 60%. So how could he fail to notice the improvement? Now feeling completely elated, he went around the room and began picking up not just the bed, but everything he could lay his hands on, and generally made a mess of things inside. Only after the chief nurse passing by heard the commotion and scolded him did he stop his tomfoolery. Oh, I didn't know that this was such a sophisticated story where the word tomfoolery could be used. Okay. I'm very sorry. As soon as the chief nurse left his room, Jinu spat out a sigh of relief. Whew. However, he couldn't calm down at all. His heart was beating like crazy. Thud, 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 or as a matter of fact, his chest actually hurt. The daily quests that would continue to show up every day in the stat points as the reward. As long as this unexplainable phenomenon didn't come to a sudden end, he'd be able to live a completely different life to the one he'd been leading until now. This was an unbelievable opportunity for him. Besides that, the stat window also showed his level. Does this mean I can also increase my level too? Eventually, though, Jinu shook his head. There's no way. Now that would be too good to be true. He wasn't hoping that far, anyway. The rewards from the quests alone were plenty enough for him. He'd use the stat points to increase his abilities. Every day he'd grow to be stronger compared to yesterday. He'd be stronger today compared to today. He'd be stronger tomorrow. Me? Getting stronger? The ranky hunter, and also always mocked as the weakest weapon. He didn't even think about climbing up as far as the ranks S or A. Even the notion of getting to rank C or D, like those hunters he'd been working with, would truly be seen as a laughable one. Indeed, they'd despairingly point their fingers at him and guffaw their heads off. Sung Jinu was getting stronger? That Sung Jinu? The one and only on this planet? However, he didn't care if they laughed at him. No, he was already used to being the butt of many jokes. He was just happy that an opportunity had fallen on his lap. That was all. Suddenly, a question mark floated over his head. Could this be the process of my reawakening? Although extremely rare, the cases of bottom-tier hunters climbing up to the top through reawakening had happened before, for sure. Not gonna lie, this needs to be a weekly thing because waiting 2 weeks is killing me. I gotta think about... while I could easily do this every week, it gives me a moment to rest in between. Plus, if you... well, that's actually the webcomic. My reactions is to the webcomic, so it'll be a little bit different from the light novel. But understand, I do these every other week just for my voice alone, because I already do enough through the week as it is. So, I understand you want to have more every week. It gives me a little bit more freedom on top of everything else I do. But we'll see as we go. Although extremely rare, the cases of bottom-tier hunters climbing up to the top through reawakening had happened before, for sure. If so, then could those hunters who got stronger through reawakening experience a similar sort of situation as he was in? Let's find out. Feeling genuinely curious now, Jinu settled down in front of a computer located at the corner of the hospital room. Since he was staying in a VIP room provided free of charge by the Hunters Association, this computer wasn't the only item of convenience found here. That's the sound of me being on a computer. Jinu's fingers typed rapidly on the keyboard. Searching, and then more searching. He visited countless websites. He even entered those websites that one couldn't even get anywhere near without a hunter's license. He even resorted to paying for information and continued to rummage through every document and article he found. However, rather than finding similar events as his, he couldn't even find a single mention of a president's either. In my head, I wanted to make sure I said that word right, because I don't use presidents all that often. He couldn't even find a single mention of a president's either. It's different. His reawakening was completely different from the normal ones, as it turned out. Most other hunters who underwent reawakening process, or is it the reawakening process? I'll just say the. Most other hunters who underwent the reawakening process gained their newfound strength through roughly the similar process as their first awakening as a hunter. Not one of them had experienced hearing weird voices at the brink of death, nor did they get to increase their strength through stat values and such. And that is the end of Chapter 11. Moving on to Chapter 12. Still, I can't be too certain, so... To be 100% sure, Sung Jinu anonymously opened a thread on the internet forum exclusive to licensed hunters. Title: Something weird has happened to me. Description: I can suddenly see my stats in numbers like in a video game, and I can even increase their values too. Is there anyone who has experienced something similar to me? Below that OG post, comments figuratively exploded forth. Anonymous: LOL, why don't you stop screwing around, dude? Anonymous: Isn't he just alone? Anonymous: Lost his darn mind. Anonymous: Maybe you've played too many games. Anonymous: By any chance, are you a cartoonist? Anonymous: Go visit Zinleo's hospital, okay? Anonymous:
I'd like to hear the details first.
Anonymous:
Stop accepting all sorts of trash just because they hold the hunter license. This forum needs to go through a cleansing. Seriously, now.
Too long, TL. I removed all the pure Korean internet slangs emojis from the raw. Learned my lesson from my previous novel. And this is Chugong writing this in. Dozens of comments, all with roughly the similar contents, flooded in. Jinu spat out a groan. He had spent a long time looking around, but he had nothing to show for his troubles. He got called a loon in the forum, and people disparaged him. He did all this, yet seeing that there was no information to gather. I guess that my case is really a unique one. He was the only one under the heavens. Among heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one. I get strong vibes, and this story came out before Jujutsu Kaisen did. He was the only one under the heavens, the most unique hunter in the world. He still needed some time to figure out how much of a help this strange phenomenon would provide, and just how far he could actually grow through it. But at least he got a good feeling about this whole thing. When he took a look outside, the night had deepened quite considerably. When did the time get so late? Jinu frowned deeply. His eyes ached a bit after staring into a computer monitor for so long. Jinu massaged his forehead and stood up from the chair to loosen his body with a bout of light stretching. He moved his body this way and that for a while. He bent his body 90 degrees, and that's when he discovered 2 small boxes lying forgotten on the floor. Ah! The random boxes. 2 boxes wrapped in the monotone gift wrappers and topped off with a ribbon, exactly like the ones in video games. They must have fallen off from the bed when I was making a mess of the room earlier. He had completely forgotten about them after receiving those as his rewards. Jinu picked up the closest box and opened its lid. A Band-Aid? He dumbfoundedly stared at the thing that looked exactly like the regular Band-Aid for a while, only for the information about it to float up above in green letters.
Item: Band-Aid. A regular Band-Aid, useful in patching up small wounds, can be stored inside your inventory.
It is a Band-Aid. He was hopeful that this thing might possess some kind of a special attribute like the treasures found within the dungeons, but he wasn't so lucky today. Of course, I haven't heard of anyone finding Band-Aids inside a dungeon to begin with. With his mind half in disappointment and the other half in anticipation, he opened the remaining box, and he got himself a brand new ballpoint pen. He studied it from all sorts of angles and even clicked on the tip so the ballpoint would come out, but it was still your average pen.
Item: Ballpoint pen. An average ballpoint pen can be stored inside your inventory.
It was quite likely that, as its name implied, all sorts of random junk would come out from the random boxes. Well, it wasn't as if he was left empty-handed anyway. Sure, he didn't really have any needs for either the Band-Aid or the pen right now, but thanks to them, he got to learn about the existence of the thing called the inventory. Also, seeing the information on other objects found in the room did not show up. He figured, seeing that the information on other objects found in the room did not show up, he figured that only the info on the items from the random box could be read. Inventory. As soon as he called out for his inventory, a graphical representation of a storage unit with dozens of slots appeared in the air. As fitting the storage unit of a level 1 user, it was not as empty as he thought. He thought there would be nothing in there, but inside the first slot he found a rather unfamiliar object. Isn't that? Jinu took that out immediately.
Item: Kim Son 6 Steel's Longsword. Attack +10.
It was precisely Mr. Kim's sword that Jinu picked up back in the underground temple. He assumed that it was left behind inside the gate, though. Hey, nice to see you too. A smile formed on Jinu's face. He felt happy seeing this thing again, what with both of them having survived that hellish death trap. Besides, it was too wasteful to just be abandoned in a different dimension, wasn't it? Didn't Mr. Kim say he bought this for around 3 million won? That's roughly $2,600. The weapons of hunters outwardly look rather plain, but the truth was anything but. Monsters couldn't be damaged with weapons that did not carry the wielder's magic energy. So, weapons crafted especially for the purpose of dealing with those bastards would always be quite pricey. Looks like I'll have to rely on this guy for a while. He had been fighting with his bare hands until now, because he couldn't afford to buy a proper weapon. Although it was a cheap sword, he was still rather grateful for it. You're mine now. If Mr. Kim saw this sword in his hands in the future, he might start foaming at the mouth and angrily demand its return. Well, he was a selfish man who readily discarded the savior of his life, so it was rather a good possibility. However, both this sword and this opportunity were given to him in return for sacrificing his life, so he wasn't planning to give it back that easily. Jinu's eyes sharpened considerably. He had learned 2 things about reality back in that temple. Firstly, he needed to become far, far stronger. He was weak and almost died several times as a result. That wasn't all. He knew what the results would be, yet he couldn't stop that chore boy hunter from stepping forward. Not chore boy. Choir boy hunter from stepping forward. And also he knew Mr. Kim was in the wrong, but he could not help Mr. Song at all. Because he wanted to survive, He turned his gaze away, even though he knew what was right. If he didn't want to be ashamed of himself again, then he simply had to become stronger. And finally, there is no room for unnecessary kindness. What he got after his acts of kindness was the betrayal of his comrades. 3 of them abandoned him, who couldn't even move properly, and ran away. He desperately called out to them, but none returned to help him. None of them could remember just who had saved their lives only a few moments ago. Give and take. He swore not to take on any unnecessary risk out of some unconditional act of kindness. The most important thing at the end of the day was his own life, after all. He swore not to take... Oh, sorry, I was reading that again because I was looking over at chat. My bad. Apologies for that, everybody. I want to make sure that chat is good. Those were 2 important life lessons Jinu got to engrave in his heart after experiencing a near-death event. To become stronger than before, and to become more selfish than before. I can do this. Jinu was one of those types of people who would never forget what he had been taught. Inside a certain Pojang, Pojang matcha, the Korean style, it's a Korean style covered street stall. The nurse Choi Yu-ra was busy chatting to a friend she hadn't seen in a long time as the night wore on.
Ah, I almost forgot.
Yu-ra belatedly recalled that her friend was an employee of the Hunters Association. The reason for her finding work in the Hunters Hospital was in no small part due to this friend.
You know a lot about hunters, right? Well, more than most people, sure. What's up? Is there a hunter with an ability to heal their own wounds really quickly? Aren't those healer-type hunters? One healing spell later, every wound goes bye-bye. No, not like magic and stuff. I mean like unconsciously. Like unconsciously? For example, when the person has lost consciousness or when he's in the middle of sleep.
Yura's friend shook her head.
There's no way. That'd be something like regeneration. And that's an incredible ability, you know? That's a unique trait only the rarest of all top-tier monsters exceeding the rank of A possess. There's no human who possesses it, though. But there's no human who possesses it, though? I've never heard of a hunter who has such an ability. Really?
Could she have made a mistake then? Yura slowly nodded her head. It was at this point that her friend spoke again.
But then again, I don't know. Maybe it's possible if you're talking about S-rank hunters.
Hearing her friend's words, Yura raised her head.
S-rank? There are plenty of freakish monsters within the S-rank hunters, and also, not much is known about them, right? What were they saying? Right, the hunter Big Yoon Ho from the White Tiger Guild can apparently morph into a real monster.
However, Sung Jinu was supposedly a hunter ranked E. The ranks of the hunters who were publicly viewable on the association's website. So if anyone were interested, they could take a look. Yura became curious about the morning's incident and she searched for Sung Jinu's information.
His rank is too low for him to possess such a unique
The reawakening of a hunter. She then remembered hearing hushed whispers of reawakening coming from Jinu's room when she was walking past it yesterday.
Could it be that he had gone through a reawakening?
For most regular people, it was truly impossible to befriend an S-rank hunter, never mind encountering one. Not only were there too few of them, but they also happened to be crazy busy most of the time as well. So, just what kind of a situation was this? Someone as amazing as that was a patient she was looking after? A guy who just entered the S rank having moved up from the lowly E?
If there are only a few people who realize his true value, then...
If she scored some points with him now, wouldn't it be more likely that she'd be awarded more opportunities later down the line? A chance to become acquaintances with a rank S hunter didn't happen every day after all. They were an existence that people couldn't easily meet even if they were prepared to shell out lots of money. As her imagination took flight, a bright smile slowly bloomed on Ura's face.
Oh my gosh! You girl, did something happen? Did something nice happen? Why are you suddenly grinning like that out of the blue? Oh, it's nothing, nothing much.
Ura continued to shake her head, but the smile on her lips didn't want to go away that easily. Part 8. Level Up.
Oh my goodness, look at that guy's physique! Was that patient's body that good before?
Two young female nurses walking in the corridor whispered to each other as soon as they spotted Sung Jinu. He pretended to have not heard them and quietly returned to his room. It had been a week since he started taking on the daily quests. Several changes took place during this time. One of them happened to be the transformation of his body. Jinu stood before the mirror mounted on the hospital's room wall by the corner. He checked out his entire body in front of this full-length mirror. He got a bit embarrassed by doing something that a female university student would more likely end up doing, and only after clearing his throat twice was he able to stare straight to the mirror. The thing was, though, he had definitely changed. His body was in the middle of a transformation. I've got muscles now. The most eye-catching change was a drastic increase of his muscles. The normal-looking flabby flesh was gradually disappearing, only to be replaced by hard muscles. Thanks to that, his shoulders had widened more and his overall frame had gotten bigger as well. Even then, doesn't seem heavy and slow. Only the necessary amount of muscles in the necessary places. If he were to describe the overall impression his body gave off, it would be kinda like looking swift and athletic. He was a guy, and even he found this rather appealing, so it wasn't such a strange thing for young nurses to whisper about him. And it's all due to this guy over here. Jinu summoned his stat window.
Gring! Name, Sung Jinu. Level, 1. Class, 0. Title, none.
Well,
Class, none.
why did I say 0?
Class, none. Title, none. HP, 10.
Why did I say 10?
100. MP, 10. Tiredness, 0. Stats, Strength, 31. Stamina, 10. Agility, 10. Intelligence, 10. Perception, 10. Available points to distribute, 0. Skills, Passive skills, Unknown level max. Tenacity level 1. Active skills, Dash level 1.
His strength stat had gone past 30 already. Since he thought that it'd be hard to tell the kind of effects the increases in other stats would bring, he ended up investing all the points he earned on the strength stat, which seemed to be the easiest way to feel the change taking place within. Besides, strength played a key role when fighting monsters, so that was like killing two birds with one stone. My body wouldn't have transformed like this much just because I exercised for a few days. In that case, there could be only one explanation. With his strength value continuously rising up, the muscles were changing their shapes in order to display the maximum amount of effort, too. He couldn't think of any other reason besides that one. He was inwardly worried about investing too many points to the strength stat, but after seeing his transformed body, he became rather happy and all the worries in his mind were forgotten for now. However, it is way too eye-catching, isn't it? The number of times he was mentioned by the nurses was constantly on the rise. It was quite likely that, since their job involved looking after human bodies, their levels of discernment could have been higher than most. Jinu possessed quite a keen sense of hearing, so whenever his name was mentioned in the vicinity, he took note of it. I guess it's time for me to leave this hospital, no? That's the end of Chapter 12. Onwards to Chapter 13. It was not good to be the center of attention. Not only would he feel uncomfortable being placed under the spotlight, but he also didn't want to let others know of this strange phenomenon. Didn't the old saying go something like, scratching unnecessarily results in more flakes to clean up or something like that? That's a nasty saying, and that's TL from me. He wanted to increase his stat points as quietly as possible. And it shouldn't be a problem for me to leave the hospital now, too. Thankfully, tests had shown that he was normal and healthy, meaning he could leave at any time he wanted. No, hang on a minute. It kind of felt that both the hospital and the association wanted him to leave in the first place. Well, it'd be a waste to spend that much money as a hospital fee on a measly rank E like him. One of the special privileges the S-rank hunters enjoyed was the government paying for all of the me flip-flopping over my words again. My apologies. One of the special privileges the S-rank hunters enjoyed was the government paying for all of their health-related expenses. Of course, that was a story happening in another cosmos as far as Jinnu was concerned. So he figured that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to leave this hospital right about now. And there was something he wanted to confirm as well. Now, where did I put it? Jin rummaged around his pockets and brought something out. It was a key gleaming in a golden hue. It featured such a simple design that it could be passed off as an accessory at a casual glance. Jin observed the key for a long time before he secured it back inside his pocket. What's going on, Julian? It's good to see you. Hope your day has been good. While he was in the middle of being discharged, a certain young female nurse hurriedly ran to where he was.
Mr. Sung Jinu, are you getting ready to be discharged today?
Pardon? Yes, I am. She was the nurse in charge of his care, Choi Yura. Yura formed a rueful expression when she heard his affirmation. Jin didn't know why, so he could only stand there looking rather confused. He wondered if he had made a mistake somewhere, but he couldn't think of anything. Yura hesitated slightly before pulling out a small memo pad.
Will it be okay if you give me your contact numbers?
My contact numbers?
Yes, only if you're okay with it.
Could there be some test results that needed to be sent at a later date or something? Jin didn't think too much about it and took the memo pad. However, all he got from her was just that, a memo pad and nothing else. When Jin stared at her, her face reddened. What's the matter?
Well, about a pen.
Please wait. Oh, wait. Oh,
What's the matter?
Well, about a pen. Sorry, I read that conversation wrong.
Please wait.
She must have forgotten in a rush to get here. Yura became flustered and hurriedly turned around. Hang on a minute. A pen, is it? He didn't have to think for long. Before anyone noticed it, he was already holding a pen. The moment he thought about the pen nestled quietly within his inventory, it automatically appeared in his hand. Once an item was placed within the inventory, he could retrieve it freely with his thoughts alone. Thank you for subscribing, Tokyo Ghouls. I hope your day is going great. And if not, then I hope what I do here can brighten up your day. Once an item was placed within the inventory, he could retrieve it freely with his thoughts alone. What a convenient feature of the inventory that was. Confirming the pen in his hand, Jin called out to Yura. Wait, I looked and luckily enough I had a pen on me.
Oh, really? Whew, what a relief.
Yura placed a hand on her chest and sighed out in relief. Jin smiled at that and he jotted down his phone number. This happened all the time now. The items that came out of the random box always saw some sort of usage pretty soon after he got them. When a raincoat came out, rain fell the next day. He got a cup the day before the hospital inexplicably ran out of paper cups. Of course, stuff like a band-aid with no clear uses sometimes popped up, but most of the time they did come in handy.
Here it is.
You are received. Oh, wait. Here it is. Here it is. You are received the memo pad back from Jin with an elated expression etched on her face. She then bowed her head as well. Please take care of me from now on.
Oh, sure thing. Me too.
Yura spun around and hurriedly disappeared to somewhere. Jin looked at her departing back and tilted his head this way and that. Oh, wait.
Please take care of me from now on.
Oh, sure thing. Me too. And then, Yura spun around and hurriedly disappeared to somewhere. Jinu looked at her departing back and tilted her head this way and that. By the way, how does she expect me to take care of her? She was such a cute nurse to begin with, yet she was even courteous. She was even courteous as well. Jin thought as such and left the hospital with a refreshed, airy mind. The first place he visited was the HQ of the Hunters Association, located in the district of Guro in Seoul. The smartphones used by the hunters were designed with special components, so in order to get one, he had to apply for it at the association. The association employee spoked, me and my words. The association employee spoke while looking at the computer monitor. Looks like your phone will become available only after 2 weeks, Hunter Neem. Pardon me? Why so long? Jin's eyes opened up wider. His old phone was smashed to bits when he was getting chased around by the god statue. However, he now had to wait for 2 weeks for a new phone to arrive. If you need a phone right away, we can loan you one on a temporary basis fee. But the fee for each usage is 50,000 won, just over $44. 50,000 won. He wasn't even buying one, just renting it for a little while. Yet it cost that much? If he thought about his current financial status, that was way too big an expense. Well, it's not like someone will contact me anyway. If the association failed to get a hold of someone on his or her smartphone, they called the house instead. So there was no real reason for him to spend money and get himself a temp phone right now. Jin shook his head. I'll just wait. I understand. As soon as your replacement phone arrives, we'll send it straight to your residence. Thank you. Jin got up to leave. His business was done here. He had already completed the daily quests that never failed to show up every day, and the application for the new phone at the association also ended faster than he expected. Jin exited from the association building and pulled the golden key out again. Is it now time to check this little guy out then? The information on the key floated up in green letters.
Item, dungeon key. Rank, rarity, E.
ED also reflects the difficulty in acquiring the item.
Type, key. A key that transfers you to an instant dungeon. Can be used at the third exit of the Hapjeong subway station. Hapjeong. Can be used at the third exit of the Hapjeong subway station.
He found this key inside one of the random boxes he got as the daily quest rewards. At first, he wondered why a key would come from there. But once he saw the rarity category, he immediately realized that this was no ordinary item. It was one of the reasons prompting him to get discharged from the hospital as well. An entrance key to the instant dungeon, huh? Whether it was called instant or not, a dungeon was a dungeon. If it was about dungeons, then he had plenty of painful memories regarding those. This one time, he participated in a raid ranked E and ended up getting wounded so badly that he had to stay in the hospital for over a week. Back then, he was able to survive because of the comrades that went with him. But if he used this key to enter a dungeon, then it meant that he had to enter it alone. He deliberated for a long time before making up his mind. I'm sure there'll be no problems as long as I just take a quick peek inside. If things looked bad, all he had to do was run away after all. He had been running 10 kilometers per every day for a while now, so he was pretty confident of running away, actually. And it was his mistake for taking it too lightly. Where are you reading the light novel from? They also have the light novel on Tapas as well. The same way that they have the webcomic on Tapas, they also have the light novel on Tapas as well. But there are plenty of places where you can look up, you can basically look up the entire light novel available for you to read at a moment's notice. There are a lot of choices, but you know me, I like to read from the official sources. You guys deserve that much. And it was his mistake for taking it too lightly. Slam! Slam! Is there a wall blocking me? He pounded on the invisible wall and shouted at the outside, but no one replied back. People continued to carry on with their own lives. That was all. Sometimes someone approached the Hapjeong station, but they simply vanished as soon as coming in contact with this invisible wall. It was quite likely that the place he was in and the outside world were two separate dimensions. Jin tried his hardest to force his way out of this place, which prompted a new alert message to pop up.
Tring! You cannot exit the dungeon. Please defeat the boss first or find the return crystal.
It was the same message as before. The key in his possession disappeared as soon as he set foot inside the third exit of the subway station. And by the time Jin realized things had gone rather awry, and hurriedly turned around to leave, it was already too late. He was thinking of finding a hidden gate or some kind of a doorway within the third exit that would transport him to a dungeon. But his expectation was completely off the mark. And quite different from the regular dungeons. He couldn't even leave as he pleased, too. It's different from other dungeons. Jin spat out a long groan and looked behind him. Thank you, no problem, Mihai. What he could see now was the interior of the subway station that had transformed into a jungle. Walls were thick with twisting vines, and rancor odor akin to rotting corpses assaulted his senses. Heck, he could even hear the cries of what sounded like wild beasts from afar even every now and then. There's a pause. It wasn't that there was a hidden entrance somewhere near the entrance of the Hapjeong station, but the entire station had become a dungeon instead. Jin pulled the steel longsword out from his inventory.
Tring! Item: Kim Song-sik steel longsword. Kim Song-sik steel. Kim Song-sik steel. Kim Song-sik steel. Say that 10 times fast. Item: Kim Song-sik steel longsword. Attack 10 plus 10.
His back was blocked off, and he had no method of contacting outside, so the only option left was to go forward. Here we go. Jin nervously swallowed his saliva. We got our first mention. We got our first mention of it of the day. Ting, 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 ting. First mention of saliva in a chapter. Ting, 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 ting. It happened so many times. I'm surprised it took this many chapters for it to start saying that. Ramil, you already know. Jin nervously swallowed his saliva and slowly descended the steps. He held his breath and surveyed his surroundings, but he couldn't sense anything particular. However, it was truly forbidden to underestimate the dangers in a dungeon. Among the low-ranked monsters, there was quite a few that knew how to mask and hide their presences very well. No, maybe because they were so low ranks that they had no choice but to hide and wait to ambush their prey. Past the toilets, he entered deeper and encountered the underground shopping center. Shops were worn down and in complete disarray, looking more like a ruin than anything else. Seeing the humanless ruined shells of the shops dimly illuminated by the flickering overhead lamps, something felt rather ominous, creepy, and sinister. Flicker, flicker. I'm not making up these sound effects. I'm reading them right off the pages. A few of the lamps continued to flicker as if their life was nearing the end. Jin carefully stepped on the overgrown weeds jutting out from between the cracked floor tiles and continued on forward. But he picked up on a general aura of unease and scanned his surroundings. Brief pause. Everything seemed so quiet and still, but he did sense a gaze of something. And then there was this smell, too. A seriously rotten odor of an animal carcass with flies buzzing around was coming from somewhere. For Jin, who had frequently entered dungeons, this was a rather familiar smell. This smell, an animal-type monster. However, he still couldn't find its whereabouts at all, just like how a predator would stalk its prey. Oh, so you want to remain hidden and wait for your chance, is it? In that case, he should give it one. Jin deliberately turned around and presented his back, and very slowly retread the path he had taken until now. An animal would try to pounce on the prey as soon as its back was shown. An animal-type monster would be no different. And so, it happened when he took his third step. Smash! The shop window of a clothing store behind him shattered into pieces, and something jumped out. And this something, as soon as it landed on the ground, leapt towards Jin's exposed neck in one go. Jin had been getting ready for a sneak attack like this one, so almost immediately he swung the sword in the direction of the sound. It was a perfectly executed instinctive counter. The sharp edge of the blade sliced open the creature's maw. The monster spat out a pained cry as it flew away from Jin and crashed on the ground, rolling around in a heap. The sound effects of a dog-type whimpering repeated. It was a huge wolf with a reddish coat of fur. The wolf, with its maw sliced away, wiggled around and threw a seizure-like fit as if it was under a great deal of pain. When he took a closer look, its name also appeared on top of its head, just like the centipedes from the penalty zone.
Iron-fanged lichen.
However, unlike before, its name was in white, not red. There's no time to waste here. This was the perfect opportunity while the monster could not move from its wound. Jin threw his body forward. He ran hard and fast and chopped down with his sword, separating the creature's head from its body. Lycan spat out the final roar and stopped breathing afterwards.
You've killed an iron-fanged lichen.
Good. Love the whimpering? Love the whimpering noise? I'm good at noises. I am not D. Bradley Baker levels of animal noises, but I do some pretty decent animal sounds. Good. However, the joy of victory was temporary. 2 more lichens jumped out from their hiding place from behind the shop's darkness. Darn it, it was in a pack? Jin's eyes grew wider. They bared their big fangs and closed the distance in an instant. Jin's expression crumpled dismally. He must have chopped down too hard from all the excitement because his sword was lodged on the ground too deep and it stubbornly refused to come out. It stuck somewhere. It was at this moment that one of the lichens aimed for his face and leapt up. Darn it! Jin ducked low. The lichen flew over his head and landed face first on the ground after failing to stop in time. Stab! When its fangs stabbed onto the stone floor, cracks instantly formed on the hard surface. I guess it's not called iron-fanged for nothing, huh? Of course, he didn't have the leeway to stay there and admire this scene. One more monster was still running towards his front at the moment, too. His sword showed no signs of coming free from its earthly prison for the time being. Gonna need to get some water in a minute. Screw this. Jin had no choice but to give up on the sword for now and threw a hard punch at the lichen closing in. Whoosh! Accompanied by a bone-chilling sound of wind parting, his fist flew straight forward. Pow! It took just one hit, and the head of the lichen simply exploded. The corpse of the now headless lichen slammed into the ceiling above and then powerlessly fell to the ground. Thud! Huh? Jin's eyes opened up very wide and he stared dumbfoundedly at his own fist. What an unexpected destructive power that was. And that is the end of chapter 13. Onwards to chapter 14. We're getting closer and closer to my my break that I'm going to take, and then we will pick up after my break is done and continue with the rest of the chapters after that. It'll be after chapter 15. Just letting you all know, so that way you guys can get up and stretch or do whatever it is you guys got to do while I do the same. Chapter 14. The sole surviving lichen, the one that flew over Jin's head just now, lowered its tail after seeing the scene and began taking faltering steps backwards. Huh? Was this a result from him raising his strength stat? The utterly stunned Sung Jin-woo couldn't close his slack jaw as the headless lichen's legs shook like a leaf before its movements stopped for good. That was when he heard the familiar mechanical beep going off again.
Ding! You've killed an Iron Fanged lichen. Level up!
My level rose? To make sure he didn't mishear that, Jin hurriedly accessed his status window.
Name, Sung Jin-woo. Level, 2. Class, none. Title, none. HP, 205. MP, 22. Tiredness, 0. Stats, Strength, 72. Stamina, 11. Agility, 11. Intelligence, 11. Perception, 11. Available points to distribute, 0. Skills, passive skills. Unknown level max. Tenacity level 1. Active skills dash level 1.
His level really did go up. And when a level went up, a single point was added to all of his stats. As it turned out, it wasn't only the quest rewards that could impact the values of his stats. It was also possible to improve his stats through leveling up too. To think, I can actually level up. He only carried a vague expectation, but it actually became reality. His heart began to beat faster and faster. On top of that, I get more additional points from leveling up. The stat points he got from the quest rewards were 3. Meanwhile, he got 5 from leveling up once. Although he didn't like the fact that he couldn't freely distribute those points the way he liked to, but still, his growth through leveling up was much greater. Also, there was the thing about quests only being available once per day, but there was a good chance that leveling up wouldn't suffer from such restrictions. I only killed 2, but my level rose up. This was the same as in video games, and that's the reason why I love video games with level up systems. When his level was low, he could raise it up by a lot during a short space of time. And currently, Jin was only a level 2. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was right at the bottom of the pile. However, he was not what one would call a normal low-level player either. His strength stat already exceeded 30. If the strength stat rose up by 1 point every time one leveled up, then the stat value of Jin's strength was equivalent to level 20 or higher. What if a user possessing level 20's worth of strength stat hunted in the level 1 beginners hunting area? Sorry, I was looking at that wrong. My bad. I'm good. In other words, explosive leveling up. As if to prove his guess, the destructive might behind that punch easily exceeded his own expectations. The strength stat might have been multiplied by just over 3 times, but the difference in actual physical strength was well beyond that. Jin's original strength value was 10. There was the difference of 3 times the value behind the strength stat of 10 and 30, but the difference between the actual forces produced was well beyond that. One could say even 16 times the detail of a punch. Could it be? What if, as the stats values rose up, the weight was also added as well? If that was the case, then such a destructive power output could easily be explained away. Besides that, his movement speed had increased as well. If it was in the past, there was no way he'd be able to lightly evade the all-out attack of an animal, nor could his punch move fast enough to produce the sound of the air splitting apart. Right. The physical strength in my muscles has increased, so obviously my speed would have increased along the way too. Simply by raising his strength stat higher, both his power and speed had gone up. The battle against the Lycans proved this. So what would happen if he increased his agility too? His curiosity was at its peak, but he didn't have any method to find out at the moment. If he wanted to satisfy his burning curiosity, then he simply had to increase his stats, ASAP. Even still, he couldn't help but think that investing points he got as quest rewards in the agility stat kind of felt a bit wasteful. If he shored up his strength stat, both his power and speed would go up anyway. So what was the point of investing in the agility stat? Since his thoughts were as such, there was only one way to go forward here. I gotta level up lots of times. Really fast. Indeed. He'd raise the agility stat through leveling up. Every little cent saved would eventually net him a buck later down the line. If he increased the value 1 point at a time, he'd feel the difference sooner or later. Jin pried loose the sword off the ground. In that case, shall I get started for real then? There was one more monster he needed to kill after all. By the way, where did it disappear to? The lichen that was definitely somewhere nearby had gone with the wind before he had noticed it. Jin hurriedly scanned his surroundings, but he couldn't find a single trace of the creature. Quite likely, it had turned tail and ran away while he was immersed in the status windows. Well, he could have known something was up when it lowered its tail and cautiously studied his mood. Jin smacked his lips, realizing that a bundle of experience points had just escaped from his grasp. I'd be feeling the same way when I'm playing games and an enemy gets away from me and I don't get the XP for it. It'd be making me upset too. Hang on. Do these things give away things like magic crystals too? The sudden thought popping up in his head stopped him in his tracks. Monsters appearing within the gates all possessed one or sometimes several magic crystals in them. If one got lucky, a rune stone might drop too. Magic crystals could be used for a variety of purposes, and they alone exchanged hands for princely sums? Or is it pricely sums? And they alone exchange hands for princely sums. No need to even mention the rune stones, which could be used by hunters to learn brand new skills. It was not an exaggeration to say that the reasons why hunters participated in raids was not just because of the promised payout from the related organizations, but also these magic crystals as well. Jin was also a hunter. He was successful in killing these monsters, so not being rewarded for his work kind of felt a bit like he was wrong somehow. Feeling a little rueful, he sliced open the lichen's stomach, but it turned out to be a waste of time. It seemed that these creatures were fundamentally different from the regular monsters. The thing was, he had entered quite a few different dungeons in his career so far, but he had never seen these wolf-like monsters before. Jin dusted his hands and was about to stand back up, but then... He spotted something glittering within the dead lichen's mouth. So, he opened the creature's maws. One of the lichen's fangs was emitting a beam of light. When Jin reached out, a new message popped up before him.
You found the item, the canine of a lichen. Take it
Sure thing.
Item: the canine of a lichen. Rarity: none. Type: miscellaneous. A large and sharp canine of a lichen.
Sorry, family.
A large and sharp canine of a lichen can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store.
Jin got flustered a bit while staring at the canine tooth. There was a store too? Where would you find a system less friendly than the one he was saddled with? To think it was designed in such a way that the end user had to personally experience it with his own body before learning about any of its functions. Heck, he wasn't given much of an explanation during the penalty quest, and he almost died as a result back then. Jin gnashed his teeth and tried to summon this store thing. Store! He couldn't help but feel his anticipation build up, wondering if a shop with a signboard declaring store and manned by an NPC merchant, kinda like from video games, might really appear before him. However, what appeared instead was a bunch of green letters floating in the air like hologram projections, just like when he accessed his mailbox. And there were only 2 words there, too: buy and sell. What a simple-tastic store this was. Jin selected buy. He didn't have a single cent in his pockets, but he was still curious about the stuff available within the store. Unfortunately for him, the store turned out to be one cold customer.
Your level is too low to access the buy function.
He was already familiar with the cold shoulder treatment from the places that required him to pay up, so this was fine. Sure. Jin didn't think too much about it and shifted his gaze away to sell.
Will you sell item the canine of a lichen?
Yup. With the clinging sounds of coins, his inventory had appeared next. Right at the bottom of the display, in the column saying gold, he could see the number 20 appearing there. That space had been empty yesterday. 20 gold, eh? He couldn't really use that money in real life, and he couldn't even use the store properly yet, so he had no idea just how much this 20 gold was actually worth. Oh well, a creature from the Renki dungeon wouldn't have given me any decent loot to begin with. Even if there was a difference between the dungeons found beyond the gates and this so-called instant dungeon, it would be the same difference at the end of the day. Still, Jin wanted to make sure, so he was about to collect the canine from the other dead lichen, but he ended up doing a facepalm instead. I blew away its entire head, didn't I? Jin felt bitter as he turned around to go somewhere else. 20 gold and its unknown worth were calling back to him, but he couldn't waste time searching for a single canine that could have flown to pretty much anywhere under this dim lighting. However, as soon as he turned around, the feelings of bitterness dissipated in an instant. Well now, the lichen he thought had ran away actually came back with a bunch of its friends. A wonderfully bright smile bloomed on Jin's face. Even at a casual glance, there must have been over 20 of them here. Eureka! Hang on a minute. Was that the right word to use in this sort of situation? Whatever. It was definitely a word to express one's joy anyway. Jin tightly grasped the sword and spoke up. With the exception of your canines, I'm gonna massacre all of you. When the chilling glare of a man who was obsessed about making money landed on the lichens, they became intimidated and shuddered slightly. It was at this point that Jin pounced on them without mercy.
Level up! Level up! Level up!
As he expected, his levels rose up quite quickly. Simply from searching every nook and cranny of the first floor and killing all the lichens he could find, Jin's level shot right up to 7. He had jumped up 5 flights of stairs, in other words. When he caught up and killed the very last monster running desperately away from him, a strange message popped up into his view.
You have acquired the title Slaughterer of Wolves.
A title? A title?
Title Slaughterer of Wolves. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%.
TL, the hunter is a lowercase here because that's what's in the raw. The hunters until now had been written in English, actually. When he opened his status window to take a look, the title column indeed had been updated.
Name, Sung Jinu. Level, 7. Class, None. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. HP, 766. MP, 81. Tiredness, 3.
I held my hand up to showcase 3, but you guys can't even see my fingers. I'm so used to the camera being on.
Strength, 37. Stamina, 16. Agility, 16. Intelligence, 16. Perception, 16. Available points to distribute, 0.
And then, of course, it has all of the regular skills. And then we get down here to the bottom,
Passive skills, unknown level max. Tenacity level 1, active skills dash level 1.
You know what? I'll just continue to say them, but I'll just go through them quickly if they just stay the same. A bonus to his stats when fighting against animal-type monsters. Although the effect was a bit restricted, still, having his stats increased by 40%, now that didn't sound too bad at all. There are plenty of animal-type monsters out there, so would this apply to them as well? TL, the author, had been using the Hanja word for monsters to describe those found in the gates dungeons until now, but the creatures found in the instant dungeon are written in the English word monster. That's why we get this line. If that was the case, then he'd be able to easily kill monsters when participating in the future raids. However, he still earned big time even when disregarding his new title. 34 wolf canines, 2 rusted daggers, a set of traveler's clothes, and 1 return crystal. While killing these wolves, he learned that he could sometimes find loot from their bellies. Of course, none of them was all that useful. The rusted daggers possessed lower attack power bonuses compared to the sword he had been using until now. And the traveler's clothes were not something he could actually wear, but just some random vendor trash that he could hawk off to the store. When he sold them all off, he earned just over 1,000 gold.
Current gold, 1,060.
Even then, I can't really celebrate, can I? Well, no matter how much he hoarded this gold thing, he couldn't use them anyways. At least not for now. The only thing remaining besides the gold was the return crystal. When he was trying desperately to escape from the dungeon back then, the message said he'd need a return crystal if he wanted to leave. And now, if he wanted to, he could escape at any time. He found himself at a crossroads. He found himself on a crossroads. In front, the stairs leading down to the second floor. And in his hand, a single return crystal grasped tightly. Do I continue on or do I back out? If this was in the past, he'd not hesitate and choose the latter. That was how he managed to survive all those raids with his pathetic stats. Everyone said that him surviving until now was a miracle, but well, he was trying to be smart about his choices, actually. However, the story was different now. He didn't want to retreat here. He felt that if he turned away to leave now, then he'd never be able to take another step forward in his life. I've retreated enough times already, right? Wouldn't it be okay for him to jump in headlong, at least once in his life? Jin pocketed the return crystal. His steps climbing down the steps to the second floor was light. And that is the end of chapter 14. Now we move on to chapter 15. After we're done with chapter 15, then I'll take my little break, and then we'll come back. Don't worry, the break won't be long. A couple minutes at the most. Chapter 15.
Level up. Level upped.
Unlike the dungeons of the gates, there was a thing called respawn within the instant dungeon. While he was sweeping away every single monster found on the second floor, all the monsters on the first respawn. While he went back upstairs to deal with them, monsters on the second floor respawned. So on and so forth. This is okay, this is just singing to me. Because I would love nothing more than to play a game and I'm leveling up and enemies just keep respawning every single time I go back and forth, so it's just an endless loop of leveling. I love it.
Level up. Level upped.
Jin hopped between the first and second floor and killed monsters until his level no longer rose up. Who knows when I'll ever run into another opportunity like this one. Along the way, he got so used to this place that he was able to predict from where and how the monsters would try to attack him. A monkey falling from the ceiling. He lightly evaded the claws of the monkey-type monster falling from the ceiling and stabbed it in the chest with his sword. And then... one cat each from left and right. And then he orderly sliced the necks of the Black Panther-like creatures jumping at him from his sides.
You've killed a Blade Claw Briga. You've killed a Black Shadow Razan. You've killed a Black Shadow Razan.
And with these three, he had arrived at the end of the second floor. He had cleared out the second floor once more. However, his level hadn't been moving from 15 for a long time now. It seemed that reaching that high was the limit for the first 2 floors. Stats.
Strength, 45.
It's not actually the computer, so I can just go read through this like normal. Strength, 45. Stamina, 24. Agility, 24. Intelligence, 24. Perception, 24. Available points to distribute, 0. With him being level 15, his stats had risen up by quite a bit. His agility was now almost at 25. He finally got to feel the difference between the agility and the strength stat when the former hit the value of 20. The agility did not increase his speed, but rather it was as if the opponent's movement had become far slower in his perception instead. Exactly like watching a slow-motion video. The scenes of the monkeys falling from the ceiling and panthers pouncing on him played out in slow motion. Should he describe it as him being able to manipulate the time flow as he wished? It became easier to evade enemies' attacks, and it also became easier to hit them as well. As the word implied, he had indeed become more agile. The so-called speed was wholly dependent on who was looking at it. The higher his agility stat, the bigger the difference between him and his enemies would become. From their perspective, he'd look as if he was moving at an unbelievably quick speed. If both the strength and agility increase concurrently, their synergy should be pretty incredible. That was his final assessment of the agility stat. Besides all that, Jin shifted his gaze away. What should I do now? He was looking at the stairs leading down to the 3rd floor. There was a reason why he continued to hunt in the first 2 floors, even though there was a way to go even lower. It's giving me the creeps. With his perception stats so much higher, he could sense the aura of something ominous lurking down there far better than before. Without a doubt, something really strong was hiding somewhere down below. He didn't have to see it to know. Jin recalled the message he saw back by the entrance of this instant dungeon.
You cannot exit the dungeon. Please defeat the boss first or find the return crystal.
The existence of the boss. Jin had been roaming the first 2 floors in order to raise his levels until he couldn't anymore. All for the purpose of fighting this boss. He had prepared himself as much as he could, but when the time to actually go down there came, he was getting all sweaty and nervous. Jin lightly slapped both of his cheeks. I mean, I've entered a dungeon, so I can't just leave without taking a look at what this boss looks like now, can I? A certain amount of tension was a must in order to maintain the peak condition, and this amount was just about right for him. Jin gripped the sword tightly with both of his hands, slowly descended the steps. Could he have been mistaken when the steps felt unusually longer than before? He swallowed dried saliva down. What is it with this story and swallowing saliva? Now we got swallowing dried saliva. It's just, what is this? What are we doing? I'm so glad there really is no mention of that in the webcomic, I'm just saying. He swallowed dried saliva down. The lighting was worse than the first 2 floors, but there was no problem with seeing where he was going. Is it because of my perception stat? He couldn't help but feel that his eyesight had improved greatly. He cautiously climbed lower, until eventually spotting the railway tunnel used by the subway trains. No, he saw where the railway used to be. The tunnel that should have been used by trains was now filled with jet black liquid instead. What is this? Rather than a subway tunnel, it was more like a lake or a river now. Just as Jin took one more step forward to take a closer look, a long, log-like object shot out from the surface of the black water. Swish! It's fast! The thing that arrived in front of his nose in the blink of an eye was not a log, but a snake with the thickness rivaling one, actually. Taken by surprise, Jin could only swing the sword and strike the head of the snake away from him. Cling! Jin's eyes opened wider. What the heck? He did succeed in deviating that direction of the lunging snake, but his trusty steel longsword ended up breaking apart from the impact. Jin looked back in surprise. The snake must have been surprised by his counterattack as well, because it didn't try to follow up right away, but instead chose to simply glare at him while coiling itself up a distance away. The ruler of the swamp, Poison Fang Blue Kasuga. Jin could clearly see the orange-colored name of the monster. It was a creature incomparably faster and hardier than those with their names written in white. Even then, for a sword reinforced with magic energy to break like that. Jin swallowed nervously and cautiously studied the boss monster called Kasuga. Blue scales covering its entire body gleamed in an oily manner, as if it had draped itself with thick armor. Those scales had no gaps to speak of. Sword strikes wouldn't have worked in the first place. It'd be the same story for punches, too. When Jin's thoughts arrived there, the Kasuga must have finished its own analysis on its prey because it finally lunged at him once more. No matter how one looked at it, it was a frightening turn of speed, that's for sure. Jin narrowed his eyes. It's coming. When he concentrated hard, he could now clearly see the attack of the Kasuga, which was something he couldn't even properly decipher in the beginning. This was all due to the increased agility stat. Just before the Kasuga opened its maw wide and tried to swallow him, Jin swiftly sidestepped and let the attack brush past him. At the same time, he wrapped his arms around the creature and caught it in a headlock. He then tightened his grip. Sound effects for bones breaking. Jin's strength stat was almost at 50. An unbelievably powerful pressure tightened around the snake's main artery. The snake could not escape from his grip and thrashed around as if it was in pain. Jin gritted his teeth and strengthened his arms even more. Slam! Boom! Jin's body slammed against the walls and on the floor, but he never released his arms. If I didn't raise my levels as high as I could before entering here, There was literally no end to wondering about what ifs and what could have beens. However, all kinds of thoughts still swirled in Jin's head. If he didn't raise his level to the limit, if his strength stat wasn't so illogically high, then he'd have gone through incredible hell in order to kill the Kasuga. No, he might even have died here. So, his decision not to come down right away proved to be the smarter one. His choice was indeed the right one. Crack! Accompanied by a rather awful noise, the skull of Kasuga gave in and cracked apart.
You have killed the ruler of the swamp, poison-fanged blue Kasuga. Level up! Level up!
As expected of a boss mob, his level rose up by 2 after killing the Kasuga. Jin tightly clenched his fists. The level that had been stagnating at 15 had jumped up to 17. In just a single day, he crazily raised his level from 1 all the way to 17. Hey, that's that farming. When you start grinding and you start farming, it is hard to stop. However, no one hunted boss mobs for experience points. Indeed, if it was a boss mob, then it'd be all about the loot drops. When he started checking out the dead snake, 2 spots of light began gleaming from somewhere within its limp body. 2 items? Because it was a boss? His expression one of elation, Jin reached out towards the spots of light.
Ring! You have discovered item Poison Fang of Kasuga. Take it. You have discovered item Poison Sack of Kasuga. Take it.
Take them all. As soon as he said those words, a dagger made out of a bone and a small pouch with liquid in it appeared on his palms.
Item Poison Fang of Kasuga. Rarity C. Type Dagger. Attack plus 25. A dagger fashioned from the poison fang of the Kasuga. There are traces of the Kasuga's poison on it, so when attacking it will cause paralysis and bleeding status effects.
That's a dangerous combo.
Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Status effect paralysis. The target will be unable to move. Success rate is fixed. Status effect bleeding. The target's stamina will be reduced by 1% per second.
Jin nodded his head. A dagger made out of bone, made not out of bone, but from the fang, huh? It's not a bad item with those options, yeah? Next up was the pouch.
Item Poison Sack of Kasuga. Rarity A. Type Medicine. A pouch containing the refined poison of the Kasuga can be found very rarely when hunting Kasugas. Drinking this poison will give you strong skin, but the toxicity will permanently damage your muscles. Effect: the iron scales of Kasuga. 20% reduction in physical damage. Side effect: damaged muscles. Strength -35.
Jin's expression alternated between joy and anguish. The poisoned fang of Kasuga was a good weapon to replace the broken longsword. Not only did it possess over twice the attack power, but he really liked the 2 status effects of paralysis and bleeding too. However, this poison sack is a bit... Initially, he was really pleased to find an item with the A rarity rating, but when reading the description, he realized this was not something he could feel completely chuffed about. Of course, that effect of reducing all physical damage taken by 20% was a great option befitting an A-rank item. However, it also carried a fatal penalty of decreasing his strength by 35. It'd be a real painful loss for him, especially when he invested all of his points on increasing his strength stat. Was this the famed double-edged sword then? No, the expression of chicken ribs suited this item far better instead. TL, a Korean idiom. It means something like people not giving up on chicken ribs even though there isn't all that much meat around there. Maybe he might be able to use this thing only when his strength stat had risen so high that the loss of 35 points wouldn't affect him in the slightest. which should be in the distant future. It was impossible to drink it right now. For the time being, I should just hold on to it. With a rueful expression, he stored both inside his inventory. Maybe if an A-rank dagger and a C-rank medicine came out, then he might have felt not as bad as he did now. Well, he had just gotten rid of the C-rank medicine if it was useless after all. It was then a new message popped up.
With the death of the boss, the interior of the dungeon will revert back to its original state.
Suddenly, his sights blurred for a bit, and then they were restored back to normal, along with a slight bit of dizziness assaulting his senses. When he took a look around, he found himself inside a normal subway station. The lights overhead shone brightly, and the black liquid filling up the tunnel was all gone too. But where is everyone? Not just people, but even trains were strangely absent. He even checked the time while thinking that the trains had stopped running for the day because it was so late already, but the clock was indicating 10 p.m. He entered the Hapjeong station around the lunch hour, so he had spent over 9 hours inside that dungeon. I was in there for a long time, wasn't I? If it weren't for his tiredness stat being refreshed every time he leveled up, he'd have keeled over from the accumulated fatigue several times by now. Anyway, isn't it too early for the trains to stop running? Jin tilted his head as not one train showed up. No matter how long he stood there waiting, he decided to leave the station for the time being. While he was trudging towards the exit, he couldn't spot a single person. But as he climbed up the steps to get to the surface, someone shouted at Jin from above. Who goes there? Who knew that the voice of another person would sound this welcoming? Jin quickly raised his head. He saw a soldier wielding a rifle. Who are you? Why are you coming out from there? Haven't you heard the broadcasts? The expression of the soldier was so serious that even Jin's own expression hardened in an instant. Did something happen? What the? How can you even say that? The soldier approached closer, but then he spotted the broken sword in Jin's hand. After it broke, it could no longer be stored in the inventory, and Jin didn't feel like leaving it behind, so he just carried it outside like this. Seeing that, the light within the soldier's eyes changed rapidly. He then carefully studied Jin's current appearance. Now that this soldier had taken a closer look, Jin's clothes displayed various hints of the youth participating in many fierce battles recently. The crumpled expression of the soldier lightened up in an instant. Are you a hunter by any chance? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of chapter 15. Now, I will take my break, and I'll be back in a little bit so we can continue with the remaining 4 chapters. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, yeah, 5. 5 chapters. So yeah, hold tight everyone. My break will not be too long, and then we will continue the story. Thank you for your patience. I'll put it in chat so people know that I am currently on taking a break. Get my energy back, so that way we can finish the rest. And if anyone asks, then you guys can just point them in that direction as well. Thank you for your patience. I'll be back shortly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, break time is over. I'll make sure that this whole section of my break time is actually cut out, so if people listen to this as a VOD, then they don't need to worry about this long, drawn-out pause. But yeah, let's continue with chapter 16. And I also have food on the way, so I may have to momentarily step away to help bring that in, but other than that, let's keep going. Chapter 16. Yes, I am, but... please forgive me. This way, please. Let me guide you there. Sure. Sensing that his troubles might get more complicated if he said, "There's been a misunderstanding here," Sung Jin-woo decided to quietly follow the soldier's guidance for now. Jin then swept his gaze around his vicinity. Now that I see it, the surrounding atmosphere felt rather suspicious. The streets were totally deserted. The only people he could see were the soldiers and the members of the police. Also, corpses belonging to monsters, destroyed cars, and buildings with cracks running up their walls. Jin realized what had happened here. A gate must have opened up nearby. Something like that almost never happened nowadays with the well-established hunter system in place, but sometimes a gate would appear in a remote area, and it'd go unnoticed for a while. As a result, no one would come around to close it in time. When such an event unfolded, soldiers from the nearby bases were dispatched in order to buy some time, until hunters could arrive on the scene. Of course, the weapons of soldiers didn't work against the monsters. However, in order to facilitate the evacuation of civilians, someone had to be offered up as sacrifices. In other words, they were to become cannon fodder. A role someone had no choice but to perform had been saddled on the shoulders of this nation's youths. "Thank you." The soldier walking up ahead thanked Jin out of the blue. "Pardon me?" "Well, because hunters such as yourself fight hard, and we are able to go home at the end of the day, you see?" "Oh, he said thanks. That was something Jin wanted to say to the soldier instead. Soldiers to the hunters, and hunters to soldiers. As befitting those fighting to protect someone, or even something, they were expressing their gratitude against each other. Beep. The soldier's expression brightened after he received the radio transmission. "I've received a word that the monsters in the vicinity have been dealt with, and only the biggest one remains." Jin nodded his head. He didn't need to hear the soldier's explanation to know. He could actually sense the presence of a powerful life form nearby, and he could even sense several auras of hunters surrounding it too. The enhanced perception stat was transmitting crucial information in the form of sensations and feelings, and that's how Jin got to figure it out almost immediately. That thing is the boss. Soon enough, the creature could be seen in the distance. In the empty open space not too far from him, a dozen or so hunters were surrounding a giant made out of rock. It was as tall as a telephone pole. It was a golem-type monster. The soldier spat out a gasp of fear as he took a step backwards. Perhaps it was his first time seeing one, since the moment he saw it, his entire body had stiffened noticeably. But then again, most people would react in a similar fashion. The difference between seeing a monster for real and seeing it on a TV or a computer monitor was like heaven and earth after all. Unlike him, Jin remained calm and observed the unfolding situation. "Healers, concentrate your healing on the tanker!"
"We're also doing our best."
"Why isn't it dying already?"
"What are the damage dealers doing? It's not even remotely close enough to dying, is it?"
"The monster's defenses are too strong, and we just don't have enough magic-type hunters on our group."
Because they had been summoned out here in haste, none of them seemed to be high-ranked hunters. Both their defenses and attacks didn't look that effective at all. Because of that, hunters couldn't avoid being embroiled in the protracted battle of attrition. Boom! When the golem slammed its massive stone fist downwards, the hunter acting as the tanker had no choice but to keel down just for a brief second. The tanker vomited out a mouthful of blood.
"No! The tanker might die at this rate. What do you want me to do? My magic reserve is completely empty, you know."
"Hasn't the support from high-ranked hunters arrived yet?" These hunters looked like they had reached their limit. Jin's gaze, as he took all of this in, gleamed quite sharply. If it's only that much, I can do this." Jin slowly took several steps back. This golem-type boss might possess the high defense, but its rank was probably lower than its scary outward appearance might suggest. Just from the aura it emitted, I say outward, it just says scary outer appearance might suggest. Just from the aura it emitted, it was definitely weaker than the boss of the instant dungeon, the poison-fanged blue whatever. So if I could just render its high defenses to nothing... What's needed right now was a powerful strike that could penetrate past that dumb rock giant's defenses. Jin got to enough distance away and took a position of throwing something. The muscles in the arm holding the broken sword began swelling up quite violently out of the blue. Thick, pulsing veins even popped up on the back of his hand, too. All of his physical strength was concentrated on his right arm. A short while after that, the arm pulled back taut like the string of a bow was shot forward at the speed of sound. Go! The view of the rank D hunter Li Hongsu was turning dark. He couldn't continue on anymore. His prize shield had begun developing cracks as well, as if their magical energy had been depleted. The amount of healing magic hitting him from the healers had decreased quite noticeably. At this rate, every single one of them would die for sure. Li Hongsu had to make a decision, now. The only feasible plan here was for him to buy enough time so the other hunters could safely escape from here. And at a later time, hunters with higher ranks show up to kill this golem. Or we all die together here. Cold sweat drops formed on Li Hongsu's forehead. He finally firmed up his resolve. Li Hongsu shouted out while looking back, "Leave this to me and you all gotta..." It was at this moment that Li Hongsu saw it. Something flew towards here as it gleamed coldly in the night air. Actually, he could only sense that he had seen something, but his eyes couldn't really pick up on anything tangible. It was that fast. That something slammed into the golem's head and it grandly exploded. What the heck? Li Hongsu's eyes opened up super wide. The headless golem began tottering dangerously. The hunters began roaring out in elation only then. They focused their attacks once more. It's working! Our attacks are working!
It's falling! A little bit more! Just a bit more and we'll win!
It seemed that none of them had noticed the object flying in from somewhere because they were too focused on attacking the monster. With the sole exception of Li Hongsu standing right in front of the golem, that was. In the end, the golem toppled over. Sword! The heavy body fell down to the ground and kicked up a mighty dust storm. Hunters all cried out in elation and celebrated their victory.
We did it! We killed it!
Only Li Hongsu had seen everything unfold, and he slowly shook his head. No, our attacks didn't even work on this guy. Li Hongsu hurriedly searched around the vicinity of the fallen golem. Just what did destroy the head of this rock giant? Li Hongsu thought out loud and searched around. Eventually, he discovered the remains of a broken sword. Although there were traces of magic energy within it, it was basically a cheap, plain steel sword. What? Someone threw something this worthless and destroyed a boss-level golem capable of brushing off the combined attacks of 10+ hunters? Suddenly, he forgot what he wanted to see. He forgot what he wanted to say. Li Hongsu silently alerted his gaze between the corpse of the golem and the broken sword, before he ran past the cheering hunters and in the direction the sword flew in from. Excuse me! He found a dazed soldier standing there. Pardon? You talking to me? That's right, you! When a hunter with a hulking physique hurriedly rushed towards him, the soldier couldn't help but swallow nervously with a stiff face. That was how great the pressure a hunter gave off to regular people. Li Hongsu displayed the broken sword and said, Did you throw this? Oh, that? It's actually. The soldier looked behind him, only for his eyes to go round in surprise.
Huh? But there was a hunter standing right behind me, though.
Of course, there was no one there now. While the flustered soldier was looking around the vicinity, Leon Su scratched the back of his neck, and stared at the broken sword. That power, that destructive power, could it have been a high-rank hunter? He'd never know since the protagonist had disappeared already. Around the same time, Jin was on his way home. He turned around to leave as soon as the golem began teetering about. Indeed, he was the one who brought down the golem. He was well aware of this fact. Now, originally, the loot and the profit arising from a dead monster belonged solely to the hunter who managed to kill it. If he wanted to, he could contest for the rights to the golem. However, it become problematic when trying to prove that I am capable of bringing down a golem like that. Who would believe the notion of a giant golem crashing down because of an attack from a measly little E rank? He didn't even have a proper evidence. To back him up too. I wanted to make sure I read that sentence right because it reads out that way. Jin figured that neither the broken sword or the soldier standing beside him would be of a great help in that endeavor. Now, I think I just heard my family pull up with food, so let me check and see if that's them. If it isn't, we come back and reread. If it is, I'll help them out and I'll be back shortly. Sorry for the breaks, everybody. Don't worry, I'll edit this all out. Hold tight. If only I had taken my break just around this chapter, you know? But it's all good. Jin figured that neither the broken sword or the soldier standing beside him would be of a great help in that endeavor. And that would not be all. More importantly, he'd have to reveal the reason how his abilities had increased by so much that he could fell a golem like that. The harder he thought about it, he had more to lose than to gain. The one and only ability in the entire world to level up. He couldn't afford to slip up and reveal the existence of this unprecedented ability just for the sake of claiming the remains of a single golem. It's a bit of a waste, but can't be helped. Still, it wasn't as if he walked away completely empty-handed anyway. No, rather than that, he earned pretty big, actually. The message he heard the moment that giant golem fell down.
Level up.
His level rose up by 1 because he had killed the golem. Indeed, my levels will rise if I hunt the monsters from the normal dungeons. He had learned some valuable information. That alone was worth it. An old and decrepit apartment located on the outskirts of the city. Jin's home was on the 8th floor of this building. TL, I use the Commonwealth way of counting floors, so for all those who don't, it'd be the 9th floor for you. He found the key and entered the premises. It was dark inside. Jinna's still studying hard, huh? It was quite likely that his little sister was still in the library studying. He found a bowl of rice and some soup on the dining table. Mom was in the hospital for a number of years now, and these dishes were from his little sister. The piece of paper, a memo from her, contained a bunch of cutely written words. Don't starve yourself. I'ma check later if you ate them all. She must have prepared them even though she was busy as a bee, after he told her of his plans to leave the hospital earlier today. Wanted to make sure my mic was on. I sometimes get scared sometimes. Jin grinned softly and settled down to eat. However, there was something he wanted to confirm first before doing that. Status window. Name, Sung Jinu. Level 18. Class, None. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. HP, 2220. 2220. MP, 350. Tiredness, 2. Stat. Strength, 48. Stamina, 27. Agility, 27. Intelligence, 27. Perception, 27. Available points to distribute, 0. Skill, Passive skills, unknown level max, tenacity level 1, active skills dash level 1. He thought that today had been a long one. And thanks to this long day, he was now level 18. His strength was approaching 50 and other stats also had increased significantly as well. He even figured out what the agility and perception stats did too. On top of all this, add to the fact that I found a very useful dagger with good options, and all that gold that I don't know how to use just yet, then... Even if he disregarded the special medicine he got, his conquest of the instant dungeon was a resounding success. Part 9. Geckos. A person stepping outside the house in the early hours of dawn would inevitably be cautious in their movements. Well, they might end up accidentally waking up their family members after all. That was why Song Jinna was silently closing the front door to her home so that her brother wouldn't wake up from his sleep, as she was about to leave for school. But then... You going to school now?
Eh?
She was taken by surprise when a voice came from near her, and she quickly turned around to look, and she saw Jin jogging towards her. He was kitted out in tracksuit and sneakers. He had pulled the hood up high and looked as if he had been on an early morning jog. Jinna's eyes opened up real wide in shock.
What the heck? Oppa, you were up already?
Yup, been a while since I was up, you know. Hey, have fun today and be careful on the road.
Sure.
Jinna watched her brother's back as he entered the apartment and tilted her head.
Now that is so strange. Oppa actually woke up before I did.
One would never call Jin a lazy type, but Jinna was always the first one to start the day until now simply because she was unusually industrious, which was quite unfitting for her age group.
Now that I think about it...
Her older brother's back seemed broader than before for some reason.
no ways that's true.
A human's body wasn't made out of some rubber band, so how could it make any sense for him to expand and contract in a space of a few days?
I've probably made a mistake.
And that is the end of chapter 16. Onwards to chapter 17. Just as Jinna shook her head, Jin suddenly pushed forward an umbrella to her.
Why an umbrella?
Jinna received it and took a look at the sky. As it was still early dawn, the sky remained dark, but it seemed to be more or less clear and cloudless.
But it doesn't look like it's going to rain, though.
Take it anyway.
But it's heavy, you know?
Take it with you regardless. Besides, it's a folding type umbrella, so it doesn't even weigh anything. Stop exaggerating, will ya? Slam. Jin then closed the door.
Acting as he feels like.
Jinna lightly kicked the door a couple of times to express her disgruntlement, folded the umbrella, and shoved it inside the empty space in her school bag and turned around to leave.
Hang on.
Her steps came to an abrupt halt after she remembered the difference in the eye levels between her and her brother. Something was rather odd. His eye level had definitely risen up higher compared to before.
Do guys continue to grow taller even in their 20s?
There was no way that could be true. Jinna shook her head again and hurriedly walked towards her school. Click! Jin locked the door and summoned his inventory. Storage, inventory. He discovered it through various experimentation and learned that the word used doesn't matter as long as they mean the same thing. It was the same story when accessing the mailbox. As long as a word spoken meant open, the desired effect took place without fail. TL, the author, wrote open 3 times in Korean and in English in this sentence, thus I had to change it somewhat. Jin then shoved the umbrella he just got from the random box inside the digital storage in front of his eyes. TL, this is the direct translation from the raw. I didn't make a mistake. This is what it really said. Shoved the umbrella he just got from the random box inside the digital storage in front of his eyes. It's no good today again, huh? 4 days had passed by since he cleared that instant dungeon. He always remained hopeful whenever he got to open up a random box, praying for another dungeon key to pop out. But unfortunately, he hadn't been lucky so far. It must have been a pretty rare item if it was this hard to get. Well, that's that, but now. Jin entered his room. Yo, CDs, good to see you. We are on chapter 17 of today's read-through for solo leveling. Jin entered his room and sat on the edge of his bed. There was a matter he had to resolve right away. Stats. Stat. Strength 48. Stamina 27, agility, intelligence, and perception all 27 as well. Available points to distribute 12. He had been saving up the stat points earned from the quests of the past 4 days. He made sure to complete the daily quest every day. Of course, he also didn't forget to always check his rewards too. However, he hadn't distributed the points until now. The issue was, this is tough. This is tough. Indeed, he found it rather difficult to come to a decision. The strength stat. It was a wonderful stat, that's for sure. He hadn't regretted it once, investing all of his points into this one back when he started this thing. Agility. This was also a pretty darn good stat too. Against weak enemies. It only helped a little, but as the levels of his opponents rose up in the future, no doubt he'd be relying on this stat more and more. Well, the speed was a relative thing after all. And then stamina and perception. It'd be great if his stamina was high, obviously, and this perception turned out to be very useful as well. Finally, intelligence. This was the problem, child. He hadn't been able to figure out this stat's uses yet. His level had increased by quite a lot, but he didn't feel any smarter than before. His memories didn't seem to have improved, nor did his ability to calculate quickly either. I think it has to be related to magic. This stat might be something he didn't really need for the time being, which left strength, stamina, agility, and perception. Even then, this is really tough. Even then, this is really tough. So how is a light novel solo leveling to you? Oh, I like it. I like it. It beats having people ask me to show images of what I'm reading when all this is just straight up words, so you can take that imagination for yourself. Even then, this is really tough. Although he now had one less stat to choose from, he was still in a dilemma here. He didn't feel too confident at all. At least he understood that the synergy between strength and agility was very good. Even if he could deal big damage, it would be meaningless if he couldn't hit his target. On the flip side, even if he could hit accurately all the time, as long as he could not deal enough damage, it'd be a waste of time too. In that regard, one could say that strength and agility formed a set. Since my strength stat is so high, I should raise agility up to match it. If he decided to raise his agility stat, then he had to delay raising stamina instead. Well, the synergy between agility and stamina wasn't so good after all. The thing was, when agility was raised, the odds of getting struck by the enemy would decrease. But on the other hand, stamina was a stat that only displayed its true worth when the opponent actually damaged him. Of course, I do need at least the bare minimum of stamina. But raising both agility and stamina at the same time was a rather inefficient method, at least from his perspective. After a lengthy deliberation, he decided on the order of priority. The first one was agility, the second perception, finally stamina. His strength was plenty high enough, so he'd defer it for now. And as he was planning to raise his agility, perception took priority over stamina. After deciding so, Jin spent 2 points on strength. Ta-ding! Stat. Strength 50, stamina all the way to perception, all 27. Available points to distribute, 10. Well, he wanted to raise strength to be the round and even 50 for the time being. That was That was how normal human beings behave, no? Then he spent 8 points on agility, which brings his agility stat to 35 out of the 27s of his other stats. The reason for that was also not that special. He just wanted the last number to be a 5. It's far more preferable to see the numbers ending in increments of 5. Strength 50, agility 35. Seeing them end in the multiples of 5, he suddenly felt rather pleased with himself for no reason whatsoever. And as for the last 2 points, Jin invested them on perception next. With this, the point distribution had come to an end. Stat: Strength 50, Stamina 27, Agility 35, Intelligence 27, and Perception 29. Available points to distribute? 0. The only sticking point would be the fact that he couldn't quite bring Perception up to 30. Well, I don't have any more points left, so it can't be helped, I guess. Other than that, everything was okay. He figured that it'd be fine to raise stamina and agility through leveling up. You guys may not see it, but I keep looking at my actual webcam as if you guys can see my face and I'm doing facial expressions. That's another habit I'm doing. So then, I guess that's it. No matter who you were, you would be hard-pressed to feel 100% satisfied with everything. Since he had thought about his choices for a long while, he was more or less happy with them like this. It was then he could hear the telephone ringing from the living room. Is the association calling me? In the past, he didn't want to participate in the raid, so he did his best to ignore the calls until the last possible moment. But right now, he was raring to go and test out his raised abilities against various monsters. Jin quickly snatched up the receiver. This is the hunter, Sung Jinu.
Oh, you finally picked up the phone.
Too bad. It wasn't a call from the association. A rueful sigh leaked out of his mouth.
Learner Jinu, why is it so difficult to get in touch with you lately?
The voice coming from the speaker was a familiar one. It had been 4 years already since he graduated from high school and therefore stopped being a learner, but the owner of the building always attached that prefix in front of Jin's name ever since taking in both the Song siblings when they were still young kids. I'm really sorry about that. I was admitted to the hospital because of an incident a few days ago.
So that's what happened. I should have known. Well, there's that, and Learner Jin, the rent for this month hasn't come in yet, so what should I do? If it's a bit too tough for you, should I delay it for a month or two?
Oh no, it's fine. I'll send the money in a bit later.
Okay, but don't force yourself, you hear? Trying to look after your mom and your younger sister, you're going through so much hardship there. I know money is important, but don't forget to take care of your body, too.
Thank you. I won't forget that. The call ended there. Jin pulled out the bank balance from one of the drawers. The remaining amount in the account was only around 800,000 won. A groan leaked out from his mouth. After paying the rent of 500,000, he'd have 300,000 left for the month's living expenses. And the rent could be that low only because the apartment building was located on the remote outskirts of the city, as well as it being old and decrepit. Plus the owner of the building taking in consideration Jin's troubles and not raising the amount for the last couple of years. There was no way anyone would be able to find an apartment to rent for 500 grand per month nowadays. And trying to survive on 300 grand for the whole month was even tougher. I gotta make some money first. Jin decided to take care of the urgent matters first. He was no longer the same guy from a few days ago who couldn't even kill a single E-ranked monster and shiver in fear. Thank God you're still on. You're still on it. My internet was gone for a minute. Oh, I'm still going. Don't worry. I'm still going. I'm not stopping until I hit, chapter 20, and I read that one. So it's all good, Ramil. I've got to make some money first. Jin decided to take care of the urgent matters first. He was no longer the same guy from a few days ago who couldn't even kill a single E-ranked monster and shiver in fear. How did hunters make money? The best way was to kill monsters. Hunters ranked S or A could get sponsorships, shoot commercials, make appearances in TV shows, and the like to hoover up a lot of money, as much as some cables made, but their number was exceedingly low. Indeed, there were too few of them. Excluding those two few ones at the top, the majority of the hunters had to go to a dungeon in order to make money. The higher the rank, the greater the experience. Their earnings would be decided by each individual's own capabilities. For someone like Jin, who was ranked E, worked only for the association, and had no experience in dungeons ranked higher than C, such a condition was an incredibly tough one to overcome. Jin's expression scrunched up into something unsightly. Disregarding the conditions for now, if I could just enter an assault team, now that would be great. He took a look at the job postings on the Hunter's website's bulletin boards and called a few numbers, but all of them turned out to be a waste of time. No one wanted to work with a hunter ranked E. Those hunters seeking outside help via job postings were freelancers almost all of the time, which meant that they were responsible for preserving their own necks. So, understandably, they paid close attention when forming a raid team or letting someone into theirs. These people didn't possess enough abilities to enter big guilds, but their ranks were too high to work for the association. They were all kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place, but unable to go either way. Even then, these hunters still earned more than 10 million won a month, as far as I know. It was the case of high risk, high reward. Since they put their lives on the line, the profit they earned was just as big as the end of the day. It wasn't for nothing that hunters were the targets of envy from the general populace. From Jin's perspective, he could only get impatient, though. Should I just take the rank reassignment test and increase my rank right away? Eventually, Jin shook his head. He knew that was a stupid thing to do, no matter how hard he thought about it. A hunter ranked E suddenly became a high-ranked one. Whether that was A or B or maybe even C, it didn't matter. The reawakening would always become a hot topic of conversation. The masses loved nothing more than a good gossip, and hunters just so happened to be a good subject to chew on. The old saying went that if there were 5 mouths, then there would be 10 eyes, meaning the more people talked about you, the more eyes would be focused on you. I like that. I like that a lot. His stats would continue to rise up in the future, so it'd be only a matter of time before his special constitution was discovered by the others.
A hunter who can raise his abilities up higher? He becomes stronger as time goes by? Who is this hunter?
How can he do something like that?
What should we do to become like him?
Without a doubt, many people would express their interests. After all, there hadn't been a hunter like him before. And among those expressing interests, there would be those who tried to use him, or reveal their hostile intentions towards him as well. If just one of those possesses incredible power, then. Just imagining it gave him the chills. He was far too weak as he was now. Until he possessed enough power to protect himself, he didn't want the world to know of his existence. Meaning, taking the test to reassign his ranks was out of the question. But I still need to make money here. However, that didn't mean he could go out and get a part-time job either. He didn't know when the association would call him for a raid. By raiding a dungeon, he'd get to earn both money and experience. So how could he blow that important chance just to scrounge up a few bucks by working in a local store? While he was seriously deliberating on what he needed to do, he spotted something in the bulletin board that caught his attention.
Emergency! Searching for a single hunter regardless of the rank. Needs to come right away.
Jin's eyes shot right open. This posting had popped up literally a second ago. When he hurriedly checked the contents of the posting, it wasn't too far from his home, too. Jin quickly picked the phone up. The other side must have been in a hurry as well because he answered the phone. He answered the phone call because he answered the call even before the first ringtone.
Hello?
Jin stated his reasons for calling as precisely as possible and calmly waited for the answer.
Oh, you're an E rank?
The response from the other side was better than expected.
It's fine. We just need someone to show up and fill out the head count. That is all. However, it's a gate rank C, so it'd be hard for you to hunt there. So we'll just split the profits amongst ourselves and we'll just give you 2 million won in cash. How about it? Can you come right away?
2 million won for a day's work? It was a lot of money for simply being there to make up the numbers. A rather tempting offer this was. It was regrettable that he couldn't get to share the dungeon's loot, but he might end up losing out on making 2 million just by trying to be too greedy.
For now, let's put out the urgent fires first.
Such an opportunity wouldn't come around every day, after all. 2 million was enough for him and his sister's monthly living expenses. Jin said yes to the offer. I'll be there in less than 15 minutes. And that is the end of chapter 17. Now, I actually need to take another break because the food that my family bought for me is right here, and I need to eat it while it's still hot. So if you guys can stomach another break of me eating my food, then we'll continue with the last 3 chapters of this session. Don't worry, you're only experiencing this break here because you're here live, but these breaks will not be present in the stream later on because I'll just completely cut them out. But if you guys don't mind, I'm going to eat my food while it's still hot, and then we'll continue. Back in a bit. Even though I'm currently eating food right now, I can still talk to you guys. Kitty, I am so sorry that that's currently transpiring while on the eve of your vacation. On all that stuff that's going on with your house, with all the rain, because it's been way too much rain. It's just been way too much rain here in the United States. Just simply too much. I truly am sorry that that's happening to you. If I could immediately help out and fix things up, I really would. I really would. I can only imagine that happening and all the stuff that you got to think about, all the stuff you got to work out, and you're also thinking about, okay, all this is happening, but we also have a vacation that's happening. I can only imagine. Oh, that's good, Kitty. Have someone look after the house for you, because I feel like now more than ever, you need this vacation. After all the stuff that you told us, especially with all the rain and everything else and all the extra, you need this vacation. You really need this vacation. Want to make sure I get all this food out my teeth before we get started with chapter 18, 19, and 20. Sorry about that, everybody. Wanted to make sure I ate all of my food first before we proceeded forward. There shouldn't be any more interruptions for me reading the rest of this. And, of course, later on, once everything's all said and done, I'll cut out all of these dead air parts, and then I will put the timestamps in so anyone can find the exact moment where a chapter happens and, pick up where they left off as I've done with the last part. But, Kitty, I can also say freely the swallowed saliva count for these chapters I've been reading has been exceedingly low. I think I've only seen it about maybe twice amongst all the chapters I've been reading. So thankfully, I haven't had a moment to let out a sigh for how many times I have seen that phrase in these chapters. So I'm quite happy about it. Chapter 18. Jin only needed one. Okay, there's a bubble in my throat now, and I sound so much different than I do normally. Please, hold on. Let me. That voice almost made me sound like a William. First time you got a message in Wuthering Waves to take a break? Hey, the game at least tells you to take a break, and that only happens when you're playing Wuthering Waves for like 3 hours. They want you to go outside and touch grass. But chapter 18. Jin only needed 1 minute to get ready. quickly grabbed himself a taxi and headed off to the meeting point. Yeah, you're laughing, Kitty, but that bubble in my throat made me sound like, hey, I should be the co-star in a Tom Hanks movie. I sounded like a Tom Hanks co-star there for a moment there. Jin only needed 1 minute to get ready, quickly grabbed himself a taxi and headed off to the meeting point. 9 people were already there, waiting for his arrival. The man who looked like the leader of the group waved his hand at Jin.
Hey, over here!
It was a bearded man with a fairly big physique. He smiled softly and walked closely while speaking to Jin.
Are you Mr. Sung Jin-woo?
That's right.
It's a relief you found the right place so quickly. I guess this is fate. So how about we greet each other before we get started?
The bearded man briefly introduced the members of his team. The 8 of them, including himself, were regular teammates that worked together all the time, while the remaining guy was someone who always came here to make up the numbers, just like Jin. Jin greeted other team members and studied their countenance carefully. Thanks to his enhanced perception stat, he was able to more or less sense everyone's capabilities. 5 with a similar rank, 4 with a slightly lower rank than them, 5 ranked C's, and around 4 with D or lower. There was a regulation when attempting to clear a gate rated C. The minimum number of a party had to be 10 hunters, and more than half had to be at least ranked C or higher. Only then did the association issue a permit. It seemed that them claiming to do all the hunting and he only needed to be there to make up the numbers didn't sound like an empty boasting after all.
Now we're done with introductions. Let me briefly explain the important points to remember.
The bearded man introduced himself as Hwang Dong-suk, a tanker rated C. He displayed a relaxed atmosphere as if he possessed plenty of experience raiding dungeons. As he began describing the situations one had to keep an eye out for in the middle of a raid, someone came closer to Jinu.
Excuse me, looks like we're both pieces of fluff in this party, huh?
He was none other than the other hunter Hwang Dong-suk had brought along in order to fill up the members. He was a young man with a bright expression. However, unlike Jin, he was actually going to participate in battles. He was ranked D, so he had the right to do so. Kashav, hello, welcome. We are on chapter 18 of the novel. However, unlike Jin, he was actually going to participate in battles. He was ranked D, so he had the right to do so. His name was Yu Jin-ho, aged 22. Jin slightly nodded his head as Jin-ho greeted him, before shifting his gaze away. Yu Jin-ho seemingly wanted to carry on with the conversation, but ended up scratching the back of his head awkwardly. He soon returned to his spot.
Young Nim, let's stop here and go in already.
Meaning, young Nim meaning big brother or a male addressing to an older male. Used more as an honorific by gangsters to address someone higher up in the hierarchy. Most of the time, anyways.
We'll be the ones to kill them all, so what's the point of explaining it in details like that?
Oh, wait, this is all of them. This is all the members saying this. But also, Keshav, you say, what is this all about? I am reading the chapters. I'm reading the chapters of solo leveling from the novel. This is something people have asked for in the past, and I just haven't had the time to do it. But now that I have, I am going to read through the entire light novel of solo leveling to see its differences between, the webcomic and, of course, the anime as well.
Young Nim, let's stop here and go in already.
We'll be the ones to kill them all, so what's the point of explaining it in detail like that?
Right. My ears might get blocked up with wax at this rate.
When the original team members all raised their voices, Hwang Dong-suk laughed jovially and clapped his hands.
All right, then. Enough with the explanations. Let's get going.
Everyone got ready to enter the gate.
Before we enter, you two, take a look at these.
Hwang Dong-suk pushed forward a page of a document to Jinu and Jino each. It turned out to be a simple contract.
Write your names on the bottom and sign it, and we're good to go.
The contents said he'd not participate in any hunting, he'd not participate in sharing of the loot, and when the raid was over, he'd be paid 2 million won right away. Am I interested in reading the T-Bait novel in the future? Not currently on the cards at this time, but this isn't the first time someone's asked me that. The terms were the same as what he heard over the phone. However, they were not the ones to catch his attention. I have to promise not to question them regardless of whatever incident happens inside the dungeon. Unlike the raids organized by the association, one would not be able to claim for compensation if something happened during a raid organized by the freelancers. One of the reasons why hunters couldn't get a life insurance either. One had to look after one's own neck, in other words. Only now did it feel real that Jinwoo had entered an assault team. While confirming the clauses, Jin sneaked a glance at Jinwoo's contract. As expected, he was different. Besides the promised 2 million, he was also going to share in the loot as well. Before signing the document, Jin asked Hwang Dong-suk, "What am I supposed to do when we're inside?"
Nothing too particular. Just follow us and help us carry the luggage. That's all.
Your luggage? Hwang pointed to a huge backpack one of his other members pulled out from the minivan.
You'll be carrying around lunch boxes to eat while inside. Several sets of clothing and equipment, first aid kits, and some other stuff.
Wait, first aid kits when entering a dungeon? Jin couldn't help but question this. You're not entering with a healer?
I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine.
Hwang Dong-suk smiled awkwardly. To think this team just barely met the required minimum number of hunters. One of the additional members mistook a raid as a blind date or something, and the compensation of the assault team only happened to feature a tanker and damage dealers, and not one healer. Even after hearing that there was no healer present, that oblivious additional member didn't seem too bothered by the revelation. It was the sure proof that he was a newbie. Jin smirked inwardly. They're a bunch of wannabes. However, he still signed on the contract. Not because he needed that 2 million, but because he knew very well that he could protect himself now. Here it is. I'm done too. Hwang Dong-suk confirmed the signatures of both men and shouted out in a loud voice as if he was feeling really pleased today.
Okay, let's get going, everyone.
The party headed straight to the location of the gate. It was in the middle of the halted construction site for an apartment complex. The economy nowadays isn't so good, but still. Hwang Dong-suk clicked his tongue. Like large tombstones, unfinished apartment buildings stood still sporadically, imparting a sense of foreboding to all who looked at them. Could a cemetery of giants feel this way to observers? Did you know? Yu Jin-oh had walked closer to Jin and whispered softly that while the employees and the investors are going through heck at the moment, the CEO of the project ran off to overseas 2 months ago along with 900 billion won. Jin gave the other guy plenty of hints, but it seemed like Jin-oh didn't want to leave his side at all. Well, with the exception of Jin here, all 8 of them originally belonged to one team, so it'd be hard to get along with them that easily. Young, are you always this quiet? Before anyone had noticed it, the honorific had become Hyung. Jin couldn't ignore this kid anymore. Don't you know how to take the hint? Well, I've never lived while worrying about taking hints, so... Was this guy simply a good-natured? Or just brainless? Jin wordlessly scratched the side of his head as he stared at Jin-oh and that bright smile of his. However, It was indeed true that Jin was getting unusually nervous when he got nearer a gate, but it was par for the course, really. To other hunters, raids might come across as a legitimate source of income, but to Jin, each and every one he participated so far had been a desperate, bitter struggle to make ends meet. He'd get tense because of all the painful memories stuck forever in his head.
It's over here.
Huang Dong-suk's steps came to an end. Oh! The hunters all let out a surprised gasp.
Huang Yong!
Huang Young, is this really a gate rated C? But isn't it too big?
You think the association was lying to us? They said that investigators came around here twice already.
A hole in the air, floating like a black hole. People took to calling it a gate. Its rank was assigned according to the waves of magical energy emission coming from inside. Folks from the association would stop by first to assign a rank to each one. After that, individuals or guilds wanting to clear the gate could follow the procedure and apply for a permit. Gates ranked A or B were most of the time left to the big guilds. Well, they were too difficult for freelancers to clear, after all. So, assault parties formed by freelancers took care of the gates ranked lower than that, which meant that a gate ranked C was effectively the hardest one for hunters not affiliated with anyone to enter. Huang Dong-suk stood in front of the gate and looked back at his team.
I'll be entering first. Do your best to keep up, everyone.
The tanker entered first, and the other hunters began entering one by one. You never know, so... Jin lightly stretched himself just in case. To him, Jinno began pulling out his own equipment from his bag. The sword and the shield coming out from his bag gleamed attractively under the light. Even a casual glance could tell that they were very expensive. This is the reason why you don't go outside and you flash jewelry. You don't flash jewelry ever. That's a surefire way to get your stuff snatched, or for you to get snatched. Hang on. He said that he never had to take hints before. So does that mean he's from a well-to-do family? Jin formed a surprised expression. Perhaps sensing Jin's gaze on him, Jinno confidently and bravely stood in front. Young, you said that you're ranked E, right? Don't worry, I'll protect you. Just stick by me. Jin scratched the back of his head. Just who would protect who? Okay, thanks for the sentiment. Let's go in as well. Regardless of how Jin felt, they soon followed in afterwards and safely entered the gate. The interior of the dungeon was eerily quiet. Not only that, but it was also completely dark, too. Huang Dong-suk issued his first order.
Hey, Yu Huan, I need a light.
All right.
The magic-related hunter Go Gyu Huan created a ball of light in midair. The surroundings became bright immediately. Huang Dong-suk lowered his shield and tilted his head slightly.
What the heck? Where are all the monsters?
I wonder. There's no light in here either.
Now, normally, there should have been luminous stones found here and there, inside cave-like dungeons and emitted some light to illuminate the way forward. However, this dungeon didn't have those. Jinno whispered to Jin from the side. Young, could there be a dungeon without monsters in it? Shh. Jin gestured the younger man to keep quiet, because Jin's ears were twitching. He could hear lots of footsteps coming from the distance. Jin spoke up. It's not that there aren't any. They just haven't arrived yet. Jinno swallowed nervously after hearing that. At least it didn't say he swallowed his saliva, because I would have been spent. Jinno swallowed nervously after hearing that. Rumble. Soon the party could hear what Jin had heard earlier on. Only then did Huang Dong-suk realize something was amiss here. A dungeon with no luminous stones could mean
what moves around in groups, lives in darkness, and rushes towards a source of light.
Oh, crap!
The complexions of Huang Dong-suk and his team became ashen all at the same time.
It's bugs!
Bugs are coming! Oh, screw it, man. Why the heck did it have to be bugs?
There are certain words I just can't say, so you'll have to excuse me if I find shortcuts. I have been profanity-free for the past 33 years. Huang Dong-suk cried out,
Get into your positions! They're coming! In front!
from the other side of this lone passage, some things were madly rushing towards them in a large group.
Wait, could this be an anthill?
Don't say something that might jinx us, okay?
Out of all the monster types, insects were the most troublesome to deal with. Their shells were quite hardy. They always moved around in large groups, and each individual possessed pretty high combat potential as well. And the worst of that lot just so happened to be the ant types. Countless hunters made a mistake and entered the anthills only to lose their lives very quickly. Rumble, rumble. The sounds of the insect legs rustling on the ground noisily reverberated throughout the cave. It meant that they had come pretty close now. Huang Dong-suk raised his shield right up below his chin. However, they couldn't see any insects even then. His team began raising a fuss from behind him.
What's going on here? Why can't I see them? But they're close by, though.
Dong-suk, can you see anything out in front?
It was at this time that Jin shouted out.
Above you! What?
Huang Dong-suk reflexively looked up.
Rumble!
Huge insects were running towards them on the ceiling. If they were discovered late, even for a single second, those things would have jumped down on top of their heads. When fighting against monsters such as these insect types that formed large groups, the breaking down of the team's formation would mean death for everyone involved.
If those were discovered too late, then...
Dong-suk felt a chill run down his spine. The silver lining here was that he couldn't spot a single ant-like creature among the various insects. He raised his voice and shouted out,
Fire! Fire, bring them down! Once they're on the ground, I'll attract the aggro!
Swish! Pow! Boom! When a few monsters fell down after being struck by the attacks of the hunters, the rest of them followed suit and landed back on the ground. Without a doubt, they were planning to engage the hunters. From here onwards, the capability of the tanker would prove to be crucial. Dong-suk activated his provocation skill to attract the gazes of all the monsters to himself. And as if they had a prior agreement, monsters all turned their heads to glare at Dong-suk at the same time.
I'm over here, you darn bugs!
Dozens upon dozens of monsters rushed toward Dong-suk's position. Slam! Clang! Krang! Kling! Clang! His shield managed to defend against the attacks of the bugs without fail. The strong jaws and claws couldn't tear the shield in half. The tanker Huang Dong-suk defended commendably well from the front, all stable and unmoving.
Stand by. Get in position and get ready.
Huang Dong-suk waited for the right timing. And that's the end of chapter 18. Onwards to chapter 19. Chapter 19. Even when the bugs chomped and bit at him with terrifying intensity, Huang Dong-suk remained steadfast and waited for the chance to counterattack. To make sure that the aggro wouldn't deviate from him even if the damage dealers landed a crippling blow to the enemies.
This should be enough.
With that thought, the real hunt had finally begun. To hunt. The real reason why the hunters were called hunters in the first place. Huang Dong-suk roared out,
Attack!
Along with that short but manly shout, all the accumulated firepower of the team poured out on the marauding insect hordes. This is the voice that I'm giving the insects you're just going to have to deal with. The pained screams of the monsters rose up from there. Here and everywhere. Here, there, and everywhere. Jin stood at the back and observed this situation as it unfolded. That was the contractual obligation he had to adhere to for this raid. He inwardly simulated how he'd fight alone as his eyes continued to take in the battle happening in front. How frustrating. Jin had to suppress his urges to rush out there several times already. He could see so many open gaps within the ranks of the monsters, and he also spotted the hunters missing those gaps and continued to commit simple errors. You know, when your perception is so good, you can see when people are making mistakes, but you're contractually obligated to watch them make mistakes. It's like me when I was younger, and my sister would. It's like me when I was younger, when I was a kid, and I would watch my sisters try to play one of my games, and they weren't doing it right, and I'd be all like, give me the controller, give me, but it's like, no, I want to do it. I always had the urge to take the controller from them and to show them how it was done, but here, Jin is showing plenty of restraint. It's an absolutely wonderful voice for the insects. I sound like an Ewok from Star Wars. Yup, yup. Yup, yup. I'm sorry. Continuing on. So, how could he not feel frustrated when he was not allowed to do anything and simply had to stand around? Even then, the damage to Hwang Dong-suk's team proved to be surprisingly non-existent. It was all because their teamwork was rather excellent. It seemed that the relaxed demeanor of Hwang Dong-suk before the raid began was not just for a show after all.
Jin Soka, 11 o'clock.
Young, they're coming from your right, too.
Jun Tae, Sok-min, Gyo-han, take care of the right.
Okay.
Chol-jin, your wrist swollen up. Retreat to the rear. Hwang Young, this ain't much to fret about. You want to go back only after sweeping clean the entrance? We don't know how long this raid will be, so stop being hasty from the get-go. Control your pace. Got that?
Roger that.
Perhaps because they've been working together for so long, they were able to communicate quite smoothly. Being able to communicate quickly like this would inevitably result in an excellent teamwork as well. It was a world apart from the ragtag bunch of hunters brought together by the association. What's more surprising is that this kid
turns out to be pretty handy too.
Jin's gaze shifted over to Jinno next. When a monster bit into his shield, he kicked it away and swung his sword quickly at it. The expensive sword easily separated the monster's head from its body. For a newbie D-rank hunter, he was defending himself admirably well.
His kick-butt gear is filling up the hole left behind by his lack of skills and experience, huh?
His kick-butt gear is filling up the hole left behind by his lack of skills and experience, huh? Indeed, it was not for nothing that pretty much all hunters struggled hard to get themselves good equipment. When their gazes briefly met, Jinno quickly raised his thumbs up. Just picture Rock Lee doing that. It's basically what he did. Because of his expressions that looked as if he was desperately pleading for a positive response, Jin was left with no choice but to reciprocate the same gesture as well. Looking rather satisfied now, Jin turned around. Whatever the case may have been, the end of the battle was drawing near. Once the coast was more or less clear, Hwang Dong-suk issued another order to his team.
Don't forget the magic crystals. We split them exactly 9 ways.
Yep. This is my favorite part of the raid.
Me too. Hwang Dong-suk confirmed his giggling team collecting the loot and walked closer to Jin.
We survive all thanks to you.
Excuse me?
Well, you were the first one to alert us about the monsters coming up from above, weren't you? How did you know, though?
It was a gut feeling. Jin came up with a half-cooked story on the spot. Quite obviously, he couldn't come out and say that his perception stat was high, now could he?
Oh, really? A gut feeling, huh? Well, we got lucky today. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if we didn't discover them in time.
Hoo-hoo! Dong-suk patted his chest while speaking up. It was then one of the hunters rummaging through the carcass of the insect gestured at Huang Dong-suk to come closer.
Huang Yang, please come over here for a sec.
The team had all gathered in one spot, so Dong-suk went there to join them as well.
Something's a bit off about these crawlies.
The hunters parted ways when Dong-suk arrived, allowing the bearded man to squat down and take a look at the surroundings. He couldn't spot anything out of the ordinary, though. No matter where he looked, all he could see was the dead insects.
What's off about these?
Dong-suk tilted his head. One of the team pointed at the leg of the insect monster closest to him.
I'm pretty sure that wound didn't come from us.
Dong-suk's expression crumpled slightly. He took a closer look before raising his voice.
Looks like something took a big bite out of it, doesn't it?
Right? That's not the only one with wounds like that, you see. Looky here. This one, that one over there, and over there, too. Looks like the one's missing a pair of wings as well. Could these creepy crawlies have been beaten down already before fighting us?
Dong-suk's expression hardened even more. Now he realized why the battle went off so smoothly when compared to the number of the monsters they had to fight.
Could it be that these things were fighting against something else?
It was then. Although it had been for the briefest of all moments, Jin still sensed the gazes of the several members of this team landing on him. Their eyes shifted as soon as Jin displayed a hint of sensing them. With this, he was certain now. As I thought. His initial suspicions proved to be correct. Sensing that their teamwork was so good, they must have been fighting together for a long, long time already. And without anyone dying, too. However, would such a thing be possible without a healer backing them up? No matter how good hunters were, they were still humans at the end of the day. Inevitably, they would slip up sooner or later. Well, only a short while ago, didn't their formation nearly break apart from the attack of the bugs? A bigger picture finally formed inside Jin's head, and a subtle smile formed on his lips. Maybe I can use them to my advantage. As long as they act within his calculations, that was. Dong-suk smiled and stood back up.
Well now, why don't we go a little bit deeper. We might be able to clear this dungeon rather quickly if this keeps up.
Dong-suk deliberately spoke up with a loud voice. He didn't do that for the sake of his team. Well, the original members of the team were already surrounding him to begin with. In the meantime, Jin-Oh smiled brightly and approached closer to Jin.
Young, did you see it? You saw it, right? With this, I kicked some serious monster butt today, didn't I?
Jin-Oh swung his sword around in the air. Seeing this, Jin quietly asked him. Hey, that sword and shield, they're really expensive, right?
Pardon? When I told my dad that I'd be participating in my first raid, he got them for me.
Well, in that case, I think you should keep your wits about you, too. Jin lightly patted Jin-Oh on his shoulder, and followed after the other hunters walking deeper inside the dungeon.
What is he talking about now out of the blue?
Jin-Oh tilted his head in confusion before chasing after the departing group. The cave seemed to go on forever. However, bizarrely enough, they hadn't come across a single monster as of yet. Since the dungeon was shaped like a long cavern, there was no way that they'd miss each other, too.
Could it be that the crawlies at the entrance were everything?
No way. Now that would be really strange. Still, there should be a boss at the end, right? Without one, why would a gate remain open then?
The opinions of the hunters were shared amongst themselves as they roamed the expansive but empty interior of this big dungeon.
Hold it.
Huang Dong-suk in the lead suddenly stopped walking. He stopped so abruptly that people behind him ran into his back. The hunter whose nose had slammed into the head of the guy in front of him asked with a sullen experience,
Ow! What the heck? Huang Hyung, what is it?
I need a light over here.
He's not even saying Gu Huan Ah. He's just saying Gu Huan Ah, but just not Gu Huan. Gu Huan. I need a light over here. Zhou Guhuan controlled the ball of light floating up in the air and redirected it further up ahead, exactly where Huang Dong-suk had been pointing at. Holy crap. All these? All the hunters spat out low groans. The torn wings, legs, torsos, and even heads of the bugs, remains of the various dead bugs, were strewn about everywhere as far as the light shone. The further into the cave the life got to, the greater the amount of the remains they could see. And also, a huge chamber located at the end of it all. That's the boss's room, someone muttered out softly. Huan Dong-suk nodded his head. Everyone, get your equipment ready. The hunters quickly armed themselves. Nervousness was evident on the expression of everyone present. With Dong-suk leading them in, the rest of the hunters cautiously and silently entered the boss's room. However, their silence only lasted for a few seconds afterwards. Jackpot! The hunter with the red nose cried out. He was none other than the guy whose nose slammed into someone else's back of the head. Originally, it was forbidden to shout out too loudly inside a dungeon, because there was a possibility that a monster they didn't have to fight might hear the noise and run towards where the hunters were. However, none of the others scolded the red nose for his mistake. Wowzers! How much could all of these be? It is a real jackpot, isn't it? Everyone was way too busy gasping out in admiration and happiness. That was why. Wait a second. When Zhou Guhuan fixed the beam of light high up in the middle of the air, the situation within the room became clear for all to see, as well as the jewel-like stones jutting out from one of the walls of the cave. They're mana crystals! The entire wall is made up of them. These mana stones reflected the light attractively and caused the eyes of the hunters to sparkle brightly in greed as well. Mana stones! They were one of the treasures that could be found inside dungeons. Although each stone possessed a lower amount of magic energy compared to a magic crystal extracted from a monster, they almost always were found in large quantity. So if one were able to mine them, one could earn a substantial profit. Besides, the mana stone deposit they had discovered was incredibly large. The entire wall of the huge cave was actually filled up with these stones. Let's do a quick calculation. Let's do a quick calculation. A hunter with a mathematical brain began moving his fingers in a hurry. If we can mine them all, we could be earning as much as 1 billion. 1 billion won! Even if we split 9 ways, we're looking at a payout of over 100 million per head. Oh. Smiles formed on the faces of the hunters. Jinno had been staying at the back until then, and when he heard those words, he began poking Jin's side with his elbow. Young, show me your copy of the contract. Why? Just trust me on this one. I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to law, you see? Jin shrugged his shoulders once and handed over the contract as requested. Jinno walked over to Huang Dong-suk while carrying that. Excuse me, seniors. I want to ask you about something. The eyes of the celebrating hunters immediately focused on Jinno next. Jinno flapped open Jin's contract and showed it to them. Mr. Leader, this is Jin Kyung's contract. As you can see, there is no clause about splitting the treasure beside the magic crystals earned from the hunting itself. Everyone there caught on to what Jinno was trying to say. It's customary to share the treasures or other rare items found in a dungeon equally among all the participants of the raid. The splitting of the profit in this case is different from monopolizing the magic crystals of the monsters one hunted themselves. In other words, the mana stones had to be split 10 ways, not 9. The light within the hunter's eyes changed greatly, but Dong-suk simply smiled and took a step forward. Of course, we'll be sharing them equally. I know the rules well.
We still have some things to take care of before that, though.
Dong-suk raised his index finger and pointed to his front. Jin-oh grandly flinched from that. He thought he was the one being pointed at, actually. He shuddered slightly and turned his head around to take a look and finally spotted a spider as huge as a house quietly squatting way over there. Gah! Jin-oh began taking hurried steps backwards and covering his mouth after seeing the spider's appearance. As if it was fast asleep, the huge spider didn't even budge an inch from the spot. Around the creature, there were empty shells of the dead insects piled up as high as a mountain. A fair few of them were half-eaten, and there were bodily fluids mixed in amongst them as well, basically resembling a trash pit full of food waste.
That's the boss, huh?
Did that thing eat the bugs inside the dungeon?
Well, it sure did eat a lot, didn't it?
Hunters glared at the spider and passed their opinions one at a time. Dong-suk called the others to gather round. Jin and Jin-oh, too, stood in front of Dong-suk as well.
As you all know very well, as soon as the boss is killed, the gate will start closing up. So before we kill the spider, let's mine the mana crystals first.
Everyone nodded their heads.
Choljina, did you bring along the equipment for the job?
The man named Lee Choljin shook his head.
No. Who knew we'd find mana stones inside a C-rank dungeon? All the mining equipment is back in the van.
Oh, come on now, dude. Didn't this young always tell you to keep it around just in case?
My bad. I'm really sorry about this.
Lee Choljin grinned brightly and began apologizing to Dong-suk and the rest of his teammates, and even to Jin. Han Dong-suk spoke up while scratching the back of his head.
What a bother this has become. In that case, why don't you two stay here and wait? We'll go outside and fetch the equipment in the meantime.
And that is the end of Chapter 19. Onwards to Chapter 20. And that'll be the last reading for this week, skipping next week, and then the week after. So the next time I read another chapter of this will actually be on the last day of May. Yeah, so not only that, but that's also going to be a One Piece reflection as well. So I'm going to be very busy that week. Chapter 20. When the hunters tried to leave all at the same time, Jin-oh formed a confused expression and quickly asked them, "Are you telling me and Jin-oh to remain in the boss room?" Dong-suk smiled with his eyes and replied,
"The bastard is yet to wake up even though we've been talking loudly for a while now. So I'm sure nothing's going to happen here. Well, there is some things I want to speak to my boys too, so we'll take a short smoke break as well. But don't worry, it won't take long."
Jin listened to Wang Dong-suk's rather detailed explanations and smirked inwardly. "You finally revealed your true colors, huh? But all of you are leaving at the same time? Aren't you fools taking us way too lightly?" They were looking down on him because of his low rank, of course. As Jin expected him to, Dong-suk finally began to move. It was slightly different from the youth's expectation, though. It had been 4 years since he became a hunter. During this time, he had met many hunters. One of them was an ajushi named Mr. O. He had retired from the life of a freelancer, but still showed up now and then to help out with the association's work.
"Be careful of geckos."
Mr. O used to say that rather often. When one participating in raids, one would inevitably encounter a dangerous situation. When such an event happened, some crooked immoral hunters would try to sacrifice someone who had been fighting alongside them until then, with some flimsy pretext of them not being in the same team to begin with, or that the other party was simply weaker than they were. All just to buy themselves some time for their safe escape. It was exactly like a gecko cutting off its own tail and running away.
Cutting its own tail off.
Mr. O took to calling these types of hunters geckos, and such actions as cutting off one's tail. The regulation stated that in order to enter a gate ranked C, the minimum number of participants had to be 10. Yet Hwang Dong-suk's team only had 8 members.
I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing this way. We doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine.
Indeed, he stuck to only 8 members, even though his team had entered countless gates ranked C, so much so that he could say this way until now. They obviously have no reason to fill the last 2 spots. They needed a tail that they could cut off at any given moment, after all. I really like how they're putting this. There was a reason why they were willing to accept anyone, whether it was a hunter ranked E or a newbie. And now, Kwon Dong-suk had decided to abandon both Jin and Jinho for a slightly different reason than usual. But it's a good thing for me. Jin had figured out Dong-suk's intentions pretty early on, but chose to say nothing. This was what he wanted, actually. However, unlike Jin, who was full of confidence, Jinho was quite different as he only started his work as a hunter today. Jinho spoke with a voice full of worries.
No, wait a minute. That is just... Why don't we leave together?
It was then Jin spotted one of the hunters at the back raise his hand towards his hips. So he placed his hand on Jinho's shoulder and spoke.
It'll be fine. We'll guard this place.
The hunter's hand heading towards his waist stopped.
Young?
Jinho was quite surprised and confused, but Jin simply kept his mouth shut and lightly shook his head. Sure, the kid was noisy and got on his nerves just a tad, but Jin wasn't planning to let him die here. After all, didn't he try to get the fair share for Jinho just now? Although that would have ultimately put him in a disadvantaged position. Dong-suk formed a smile as he looked at the 2 youths.
Our van isn't part too far, so it shouldn't take long. Well then.
Dong-suk and his lackeys quickly escaped from the boss room, and their footsteps rapidly got further and further away. Jinho turned around and demanded answers from Jinho.
How could you say those things, Young? What if that thing wakes up?
Without a doubt, he was quite scared of that spider. Looks like this kid hasn't grasped the situation yet. Jin inwardly clicked his tongue. It wasn't much of a bother. It was too much of a bother to explain everything to. Instead of an answer, he began loosening his body once more. Around the same time, Dong-suk turned around towards the boss room. The hunters following him also came to a stop. He had arrived at a far enough spot from the boss room now. At this distance, there was no danger of being overheard. Dong-suk smiled deeply and signaled to Zhou Gyo-hwan next to him with his chin.
Hey, Gyo-hwana, blow up the entrance to the boss room.
Should I blow it up?
That's right, but don't block it up completely, okay? We gotta go in there a bit later, too.
Li Qiujin then asked him.
Huang Young, is there a reason to beat around the bush like this? Why don't we just kill them now and get started right away?
Dong-suk's expression crumpled and glared at the other guy. There was no need for him to maintain the fake smile now. At least that was one less thing to worry about.
My bad.
Li Qiujin averted his gaze in fear. Dong-suk tisk-tisked.
What if we start fighting there and the spider wakes up? How will you mine those mana stones and carry them out then?
I'm sorry.
Gyo-hwan butted in.
Huang Young, since we are on that subject, wouldn't that thing wake up while we try to mine the mana stones? If so, we might end up losing big, you know?
That creature was strong enough to prey on those already scary insect-type monsters. If this team got sneak attacked in the middle of the mining operation, the losses they incur would be enormous.
That is why.
Dong-suk smirked deeply.
We're trying to offer those 2 up as food, aren't we?
We're trying to offer those 2 up as food, aren't we?
Gyo-hwan nodded his head as if he finally understood the plan. Right now, no one knew just when the spider would wake up. It could be 10 hours from now, maybe 1 hour, or it could be a minute later. That was why they had to wake the spider up now and feed it. No matter how dull the monster happened to be, it still wake up from the impact strong enough to cause the entrance to cave in.
Huang Dongsu continued on. We mine the mana stones when the spider goes back to sleep with a full belly.
The permit they got from the association would last for 5 days. They still had over 4.5 days of leeway, in other words. They would wait, and if the spider didn't go back to sleep, they would simply dispose of it and mine as much as they could before the gate closed shut. Closed shut. My inflection was wrong. My apologies. They wouldn't be able to mine everything within the hour, but with Sung Jinwoo and Yu Jin-ho no longer in the picture, they should be able to avoid losing out too much. Wouldn't that be far more preferable than working under the constant fear? Their safety was the number one priority, after all.
Of course, that's the worst possible scenario.
If they were lucky, the profit would be divided 8 ways. They mine all the mana stones and even monopolize the spider too. As an added bonus, those expensive-looking equipment on Jinho's body would become theirs too.
That sword and shield, they have to be worth at least a few 100 million won.
They had nothing to lose from this transaction at all. The corners of Dong-suk's lips arced up.
Block up the entrance so we can go and take a smoke break. Quick!
Yes, young. Guohuan replied as a blinding light began to gather on the tips of his fingers. Jinho's gaze was fixed on the sleeping spider. Even his breathing was cautious. He then asked his expression rigid with fear. That spider bastard, it's not gonna suddenly wake up on us, right? Who knows? Jin remained economical with his words. He had more or less figured out what would happen next, but if he said out loud his thoughts in full, then Jinho might faint from fear. Now that I think about it, those words were the first to come out from Jinho's mouth in the past 5 minutes or so. It seemed he was really scared right now, and he used to be so talkative too. Then it happened. With a loud explosion, the entrance of the boss room suddenly caved in. Huh? Ah! Jinho hurriedly ran towards the entrance. Unfortunately for him, the entrance was completely blocked up by the fallen rocks. He pushed on with all his might, but not a single stone budged. Jin slowly walked over there in the meantime. Young, help me push this! Jinho was still giving his all to push the blockade of stones away. He said his name was Guohuan, huh? Before the explosion, there was a flash of light. A sorcerer rank C that controlled light. This was no doubt that bastard's handiwork. Jin placed his hand on the fallen rocks. If I want to, I can get out of here at any time. He could sense the weight of the stones through his hands. They weren't as heavy as they looked. When he very slightly pushed, he felt the wall tremble gently. Of course, he wasn't thinking of leaving at all anyways. Jinho suddenly stopped pushing at the stones and cried out as if he had finally figured out the truth. His face now reddened in envy. In fury, Jinho shifted his gaze over to Jin. Those, insert profanity here, are trying to kill us! They don't want to share the mana stones, so they block the exit and let the spider devour us! Wow, you figured that out so quickly, Sherlock. Jin was rolling his eyes in his head, but still played along for the time being. Looks that way. This is troublesome. Suddenly, Jinho's reddening complexion paled in an instant. Would that be the look of someone whose blood had gone cold? No need to ask him what happened there. The silhouette of the giant monster was oh so dearly reflected in Jinho's eyes. Jin turned around. The spider's sleep had been interrupted by that loud explosion, and it was slowly raising its massive body up. The body the size of a house. Dozens upon dozens of eyes. That horrifying mouth. 8 long, long legs. Now that it had begun moving for real, it looked far more terrifying than when it was actually in a deep slumber. Jino leaked out a fearful gasp. His body had frozen stiff like a statue. On the other hand, Jin kept his sight firmly locked on the spider as he calmly summoned the poison fang of Kasaka from his inventory. You're mine. This was the perfect opportunity to test out his enhanced stats. The poison fang of Kasaka appeared in his hand. Shish! As if it had always been there. Jin gripped the dagger's hilt slightly. The reason why a hunter was called a hunter from this moment on was when the true hunt would begin.
Hang on a second, young.
However, Jino swiftly snatched up Jin's sleeve just as the latter took a couple of steps toward the spider.
What are you trying to do?
Jino's hands were shaking pretty bad. Jin used his left thumb to point over his shoulder. Obviously, I'm going to hunt that. Jin had been following around Dongsook's group up until now for that purpose. In order to monopolize the remaining monsters in the dungeon as soon as Dongsook cut the tail and ran away. This was a splendid opportunity to swallow whole all the experience points and mana crystals. Well, only if the boss hadn't devoured every monster in this dungeon, that is. If that hadn't been the case, then he would have profited a lot more, though. What a missed opportunity that was. However, Jino's facial expression clearly displayed his disbelief, as he had no idea about Jin's special constitution.
What is this young rambling on about?
There was something he'd heard from someone somewhere before. A person would stop thinking rationally the moment he or she received a mental shock beyond their capability to deal with. The hunter ranked E standing right in front said that he'd hunt the boss of a C-rank dungeon. If this was not an act of irrationality, then what else could it be? Jino asked again, this time looking rather dumbfounded.
Young, you want to hunt that thing? For real?
Jin scratched the top of his head, looking somewhat troubled before replying back with a question of his own. What? You want to hunt it then? Part 10, Give and Take. Jin turned around even before Jino had the chance to respond. There was no need to listen to his reply anyway. Even now, Jino was barely managing to stand up straight as his legs continued to shudder. From the get-go, he didn't expect anything from Jino. Rather, he was relieved that the kid didn't follow after him while saying he'd lend his aid or some such. He'll just get in my way anyway. Jin slowly approached the spider. The spider must have discovered the human's presence as well, as it was changing its direction toward them while shuffling on its 8 legs. It was coming closer. As if it found the never-before-seen prey rather strange, the spider didn't immediately rush out. Using its thick and long legs to push down on the ground, it inched closer and closer. As that giant monster slowly filled up his entire view, Jin's breathing became heavy. His heart began thumping faster and faster. Jin controlled his wayward breathing and did his absolute best to calm himself down. He had to remain focused and steady here. He recalled the exact feelings he felt when he stood at the end of the second floor of the Hopjeong Station's instant dungeon. He then recalled seeing the poison fang blue Kasaka for the first time. However, this giant spider in front of him didn't emit as much pressure as that snake did, meaning he could definitely do this. From the get-go, if he thought that this boss was impossible to clear alone, he wouldn't even have stayed here. They had gotten close enough that his face was now reflecting rather clearly on those smooth, jet-black eyes of the spider. Jin's own eyes narrowed to a slit. And that is the end of chapter 20, ladies and gentlemen. Chapter 21 onwards, all the way to chapter 30, will be on the 30th of May. On the 30th of this month. So look forward to it. Thank you for tuning in to today's reading of Solo Leveling. Y'all know how much I am enjoying reading this series. And I just want to say thank you for your patience. I'm going to allow this video to process. Then I'm going to chop out all the dead air, the break time I took and the lunch break that I took as well. I'm going to chop those out. And then once that's officially done, then I'll do the timestamps just to account for the change in duration for the entire stream. Everyone who tuned in today, from Kitty to Mihai, Kashav, who else was here? Ramil, CDs, Don T, Julian, Ravi, Uthmani, every single person who tuned in today, thank you for stopping by. I know it was a bit of a long session, but hey, it happens when you're reading an entire novel. But I look forward to reading to you guys the next time. Hope y'all enjoyed. Can't wait to see you all in my next video. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, because I am always looking forward to entertaining you, and because I know you're coming back anyway. So have a fantastic day, and once again, as always, later, peoples!